Let's get going. Welcome to the 23rd meeting of the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling of May 18th. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock. And we'll go ahead and go through the roll call real quickly. I'll start myself, Heidi Sanborn, Commissioner Valle, is he on? I think he told me he has got meetings at his office and he might be either late or not be able to make it today. So hopefully he can make it for part of the meeting. Is Commissioner Bouchard?
Present.
Great, thank you. And you're going to have to leave today, is that correct? Oh,
yeah,
no.
Probably right around 10.
Around 10, that's right. Okay, thank you. And then Commissioner Cadena? You're on? Yeah, I see her on there. Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Commissioner Dell?
Present.
Commissioner Dunleavy?
Here, good morning.
Great. And Commissioner Ferrante, I think I see you.
Here.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Kalpikoff? I think you're on, right? I see you. Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Lapis?
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Medrano, I think I see you.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. And Commissioner Osagura?
Yes, good morning. And Chair Sanborn, I'll need to leave at 11 a.m. today. Just want to let you know.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of people having to leave, so we're going to get through this as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
And Commissioner Schneider, I think I saw you. And Commissioner Sky?
Morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Toyota's on. I believe I saw her. And Commissioner Ward. Okay. So we do have a quorum and we've got people that have to go. So we're going to have to move quickly because this is a very important meeting with a lot of important items. We've got actually, we'll move on now to from approval of the meeting notes, agenda item number 2. Is there anybody that would like to make a motion or amend the meeting minutes? I heard a blip. Was that Commissioner Ward making a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Great. And all those, okay, thumbs up. Otherwise, is there anybody who abstains or okay? Looks good. All right. So we've approved the meeting minutes and we'll move quickly on to agenda item number 3, which is the public comment review for items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments? I believe, Ben?
We do not.
Great. So then we can just skip through that and start getting to the work. So thank you very much. And I do want to report back that on the meeting notes we had in there that for a request for me to ask Director Wagner to join us, and she has agreed to join us at our next meeting on June 2nd. So we're very appreciative of that. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4, which is the report progress update. And this is where Commissioner Ward and I can give you an update on where we are with the actual writing of the report. And I will turn it over to Commissioner Ward to give the update.
Well, we've made a lot of progress in the last week or two, and you can see that progress in the draft document in the full commission folder. We've added, in light of the accessibility standards, the new text is in green underline, so you can clearly identify it. And my understanding is that all commissioners now have access to be able to comment on any of those things. So now's the time to review and comment on that. The intent of the text, linking the proposals, is basically to set the context, the legislative and regulatory framework, some of the background, and also to hint at some of the discussions each of the committees have had about where we might be going in the future based on those discussions. So sort of setting the stage, and if you think that that can be done in a better way, please add your comments. Also, as we're building this, you'll start seeing where we intend to drop in proposals, but we do not yet have those links live. And I guess one other caution I'll add is the table of contents is absolutely not updated. Do not look at the table of contents as if that gives you a hint of the structure of the document. You really got to wade through it at this point, because that table of contents is done after the fact and linked. So With
But I
that,
could
because we've
answer
got
that.
a lot of policies, I'm open to questions or moving on.
I think we should probably pull up the report just so everybody can see where we are if they haven't had a chance to look at it. Is that possible?
Sure.
And I do want to say that by the next meeting, which is the June 2nd meeting, this report will be completely done and ready for your review, the table of contents and everything. So the policies we approved today to go into that report will be added at the end. We need, if any committees have not given us context language, intro language for your section, we need it or else we can't update this report. So if any committee chairs have not yet provided that to us or updates to those sections from the last report, please send it to us as quickly as possible, preferably by this Friday, so that Commissioner Ward and I can massage everything and make sure it makes sense and you have plenty of time to look at it before the June 2nd meeting.
Well, one thing I would like to highlight is that I may have missed some two-person committees that were assigned, as there were quite a flurry of them and I haven't waded through the previous minutes. So if you are aware that you're part of a two-person committee and that is not listed, please let me know as soon as possible so we can make sure.
Can we go through those right now real quickly just to make sure? Because if we don't even know our own committees, that would be a bad thing. So let's say, yeah,
So we've
got
got waste prevention, myself and Commissioner Schneider. We've got report structure and editing plus HHW, EPR, and other items, Sanborn and myself. Liaison with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, Commissioners Ferrante and Lapis. Construction demolition for market development, Sanborn and Toyota. And carpeting and flooring, Davis and Sanborn. Anything I'm missing? I see Commissioner Lapis.
First of all, on the Oregon, it was actually Toyota, not Fronte, and me.
Yep.
Thank you for that. Sorry about that, Commissioner Toyota and Commissioner Ferrante.
now have we,
And I feel like the other, Kobe, you might want to chime in. I feel like Kobe and I have like 4 or 5 two-person committees that we had, and I know there was a food waste prevention one. I think we had a couple others.
Yeah, I know that Kobe, Sky, and myself were on one as well.
and what was that titled?
Let me,
Renewable technologies.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, and we did approve that policy, so we should document that. It came from the two of you. That was on the organics and alternative technologies that we just did last month, or last meeting, yeah.
And Commissioner Lapis, what were the ones for you and Commissioner Sky?
Well, I mean, I'm actually thinking some of those were last year. So I don't know. Are these only the ones from this year? Is that
No.
the thinking?
No, this is anything that has been in the development, anything since we were formed.
Okay, Kobe, you might need to chime in. So there was a food waste prevention and rescue.
Yep.
There was
It was on
Yeah.
food waste prevention and rescue. That was just you and Commissioner
Yeah.
Sky, okay.
then we had one with Ted. We had Eric Patasher and myself on infrastructure, and that was from the organic subcommittee. And that was connected with someone else too. So I remember we kind of reinforced some of the messages from the business development structure, I think, also committee. So I think there was 3 names on it.
We're not allowed to do 3 though.
Yeah.
So then it was myself and Eric out of the organics subcommittee.
Okay.
And just to be clear, I've kind of confirmed this with CalRecycle. So we're allowed to do 2-person committees that are outside of public view. We have to be transparent about it, about which ones. That's why they really need to be in the report. And then you can certainly ask for input from external stakeholders, but they cannot be co-authors of these policies. It really needs to be, unless it's one commissioner working with one outside person, that rule still applies even if it's a non-commissioner. Just so everybody's clear on that. Okay.
Okay, we can fill in the text after the fact. Just want to make sure that we've got everybody. Anybody else? Or were there other topics that you, Commissioner Lapis, you implied you and Commissioner Sky worked on several items?
Yeah, shoot, Kobe, you need to chime in. I'm totally drawing a blank.
Wasn't there one related to exports?
Exports and then precautionary principle, right?
Right.
Okay, and then if the two-person committees could just give us a sentence or two about what you were, set up to do and what you did, that would be great.
Yeah,
And
I
you
sure
can-
appreciate that.
Yeah, that would help
Email
us.
and I'll drop it in. With that, Chair Sanborn, I'd be happy to conclude this section and move on to discussion.
Yes, let's continue through this. Okay, so this report, when Commissioner Ward and I are done with the draft after our meeting today, we will email you and say, we're as done as we're going to be, and you need to really read every word of it and make sure we got it right for the meeting on June 2nd, and that the policies are as we agreed to. And we can still adopt policies June 2nd, but we'll see how things go today. Our hope is that everything's basically done that we're going to do today, depending how fast we move. Okay? Are there any questions? Awesome. Well, let's move on since we've got people that have to go early today, and we'll move to our next agenda item, which is the policies. So we have a list of how many policies? I think there were 9, which is a lot. So we're going to have to move quickly, and we've got probably one of our most important that we'll do first, which is policy number 15 from the first report on what is recyclable. And I have been asked by Commissioner, actually at the last meeting, we asked Commissioners Dunleavy and Davis to work together to see if they could come up with an agreement on how to proceed with this so we can get consensus. And I want to say our sincerest thanks. They did do that. And that policy was uploaded just a couple of days ago. So we can go ahead and pull that up. If somebody could pull that up on the screen, because this is very important. And Commissioner Dunleavy asked me to facilitate this, which I'm happy to do. Because we really do, this is, as you know, one of our biggest charges is to define what is recyclable. And we've had a lot of public comments on this item, and it's a very, very important one to all of us. So we can go ahead and pull that up. This has been heard a few times. Yeah. Number 15 from today. And the track changes, I think, were pretty clear. It's been heard by the full commission as of today. It'll be the 4th time. We did receive one public comment letter from Greenpeace and some sign-ons regarding this policy. So hopefully you all were able to see that. And in short, they suggest that they want our help in ending what they consider greenwashing of unrecyclable plastic products and exports of plastic wastes. I think we've all talked repeatedly. We believe strongly in truth in labeling. And they also request that only plastic items that are sorted by type and currently have sufficient domestic reprocessing capacity be labeled and accepted as recyclable. So that's the gist of that letter. And that included, the signers included Jim Pouquet from the Basel Action Network, who presented the item that resulted in AJR 4 on getting us back into recommending that the U.S. get back into the Basel Convention and ratify that. Which, by the way, I've talked to SWANA about today, and they're talking to the Biden administration about it. So the Biden administration is already looking at this. Okay, so I think we should start at the top and go through the changes and see if anybody has any concerns on these track changes as we go through this, unless somebody wants to start in with comments that they've read this and they want to get right into some thoughts that they have on these issues, and you can put that in the chat that you'd like to speak. But let's go through the, scroll down to where the first changes are, if you would, please. There you go. So the purpose.
Can I make a point of order question? Sure. Are these changes from the version that was before the full commission last time, or from the version that was in front of the recycling committee last week?
Commissioner Dunleavy?
Yeah, the changes incorporate what we talked about at the last commission meeting and at the recycling committee last Friday.
Great, cool, thank you.
Okay. So are there any concerns with this language here about collecting types and forms of products? These are mostly kind of details, nothing really super substantive here, unless somebody would like to speak to that. I'm not seeing any comments, so we can keep scrolling to the next section. Perfect. The proposal will send a signal upstream. And again, details about products and material types and forms. That seems to be a consistent theme. Nothing substantive really here outside of those changes. So we can go down maybe to the next section. So does this policy, can you go back up to where it says no? That's important that we cross that out. Yeah, right there. So would this policy proposal require legislation or interaction with an agency other than CalRecycle? And the answer was no. Legislation is required to publish the Commission's initial list. A statutory change would be required for the director of CalRecycle to create a statewide recyclables list. So hopefully everybody's clear with that and okay with that. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next set of changes here. Again, this is mostly details about products or materials, traceable amounts with original facility data sources. And then we get to recommended statewide list. This is
Chair
the
Sandborn?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You have your hand up. Go ahead.
On the qualification process, what struck out seems to make that paragraph not make sense anymore. Can we review that right now?
Sure. Absolutely.
And maybe either Jeff or John have a suggestion. I don't know if it was unintentionally crossed out or if there is something intended to replace that.
Commissioners that wrote it?
I think that looks like an error, Jeff. I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, good catch.
The strikeout's an error.
Okay.
That should be not accepted.
Reliable process of quantified and verified metrics based on information. Whether their product or material meets the minimum standard. Can we just unstrike the delete? Yeah, great. I meant to say that. I had caught that too. Okay. And then a traceable account. So does that address your concerns, Commissioner Sky? Great. Okay. So we got that. Thank you for catching that. Traceable amount with original facility data. Okay. So now we're back down to the statewide list. So it reads now, the Commission employed the following source of information to determine the recommended products and materials, again, to be consistent. And then they deleted C figure 1. And the link, what is that link to? Just double checking.
That's the matrix. Yeah.
Okay. So when we put an actual link in there, which we should, but of course it doesn't seem to be working, unfortunately. Got to make sure it works, but we should say, So we'll correct that link, obviously.
Yeah, you want to make sure to have the correct spreadsheet. There was, so I'll go back and look again.
Okay, because that's super important for people to know and be able to double
Yeah.
check our work. All right, so we'll put a
Yeah.
comment in there that we're going to correct that link.
Would it be possible to add it as an appendix?
I think we should.
It's going to be hard to print it. It's
It's,
going to,
it's super big though, Nick. I remember looking at it and thinking, how would we possibly print this thing and attach it?
11 by 14
Oh,
or 11 by 17.
yeah, it's
I
the
don't-
date of, I think the date of that file is the December 18th date. So that was the final one. So I don't know why the link isn't.
okay, so we'll check with, because that's Commissioner Dell's spreadsheet, correct? So we can double check with her and get the correct link in there?
I can PDF it. It'll just be a big PDF, but at the same time, if it's going to live on this Google server moving forward, then you could put in a link that works. I don't know. I didn't do this link, but I can PDF it.
Well,
No
what I'd
problem.
like-
We did both. If we did both and have the PDF as the appendix, but also have the link so somebody can go through and look at the granular details, because the PDF is a little hard to
read.
read for me,
I
but
think-
I think
yeah.
it's important to have. in
I
the
like that.
appendix.
Why don't we do this? Jan, if you could do us a favor and then PDF it and we'll say, as of the date. So that's, because that's standing in time. And the thing with the Google Doc is that that's a living document and it might change after this report is submitted. So we just want to say that in the report that we're linking to a live document that might change over time, but the actual spreadsheet, the way it was at the time we approved this report, is in the attachment.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. Do we have any other attachments to this report? Were we be putting a PDF or something? Is this the
Yeah.
only one?
No.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Okay, so it can be a PDF. It can be an appendix.
Yeah, just to let you all know, PDFs with lots of little fonts are very challenging in terms of the accessibility requirements. So there's a lot of back-end work that's necessary when we're all done. But I think first and foremost, we need to make it workable for all of us. So, we want to minimize the kind of PDFs with small fonts with lots of columns and data.
Okay, we're going to need to keep moving to get through this. Can we just put language in there that says, see attachment A or whatever? Because this to me would be, or, we'll put a blank. But this will be as an attachment, a hard copy to remind us. Thank you. And then, so the next changes are again still about products and materials and verification. And then we'll keep scrolling down. Okay, so let's go back up to the reclaimer, make sure everybody's okay with that. Individual material grades to a reclaimer that will reprocess and convert the material. And again, most of these are rewording, nothing major. Next, and we can scroll down a little further, please. I'm not seeing any comments right here. Okay, so this is the addition. So pursuant to the long-standing guidance from the Federal Trade Commission, a baseline for recyclability is a prerequisite that recycling facilities are available to a substantial majority of consumers or communities where the item is sold, which the FTC defines, which by the way, FTC should be in a parentheses above to abbreviate it, defines as at least 60%. Additionally, a producer or a group of producers whose product type is accepted should say accepted and sorted, correct? Not accepted. What was the intent there? That doesn't make sense. So a producer,
I think this was the information that a producer has. So this is the category of producers that can submit a plan. I think. Is that,
I'd say accepted and sorted, I think.
okay, so we need to delete the deletion of and. If you can do that. And sorted by 40%. No, above. Right, there you go. That's fine. Okay, and sorted by 40% of California curbside MRF. So I think this is where, before we get into this any further, if Commissioner Davis, you could explain the 3 pathways to compliance, because this is getting into one of them, correct?
Yeah, this is one, but if you want to go up, if you want all 3 on the Commissioner
Yeah, I think
Donnelly,
we should just give the
go back
overview.
up. Yeah, go
Well,
back up.
there's one pathway.
Yeah.
Accepted by 60% of the facilities and sorted by at least 40% of the facilities. At that point, they could submit a plan to get conditional acceptance. And the plan would be presented to the commission with final approval by Director of Cal Recycle. And it would set out the timeline to achieve 60% sortation and 75% acceptance to maintain the ability to label their products as recyclable. So the first threshold is the producers would have to get 60% of the facilities accepting their material and at least 40% sorting their material.
Yeah, I think what's showing right now is the first pathway for conditional acceptance, which is 60% acceptance and sortation. And then depending on the agreements that are in place, short-term compliance to reach 75. So that was in the previous version. If you scroll down, then there's an addition, which doesn't actually say what Commissioner Donnelly just spoke to. Because I had originally put in accepted and sorted by 40%. That would allow a plan to be submitted. I think.
Okay, this is getting a little bit.
Yeah.
Can I suggest that we go to table 1 and just make sure the overview is clear to everybody? There we go. Thanks. Okay, so here's the 3 criteria, the quantified metrics for California statewide recyclability criteria. So 1 is accepted in local recycling programs. This will be collected through a public survey of local recycling programs. And the minimum statewide recyclable threshold will be that the item accepted by the local recycling program serving a substantial majority or 60% of consumers or communities where the item is sold. So then the question is, does the language in the text make it clear that this is what we're doing? And then, is everybody okay with this? And then 2 is accepted by curbside recycling service providers, again verified by a public survey of all the MRFs. And this threshold is accepted by 75% of MRFs or a demonstration of 75% acceptance. And then the 3rd criteria and I'm not sure it's a criteria, it's almost like a path to compliance. Maybe would that make sense to change that to path to compliance or path to?
Oh, that's table 3.
Oh, okay. Then separated by MRFs into individual bales, the data source and evidence is reports submitted to CalRecycle on a quarterly basis, identify materials sorted and shipped by curbside material processing facilities. And then the minimum statewide recyclable threshold is separated and sorted to CalRecycle, or reported to CalRecycle by 75% of the MRFs, or demonstration that a majority of the facilities have agreements to segregate individual material types. So I see comments. So Commissioner Sky, I think you're next, and then Ward and Schneider.
My question was related to this. I'm glad that you went to the table. There's confusion about the 60% versus 75%, and 60% is about whether residents have access to the recycling. That's item 1, and then 75% is about the MRFs accepting it. So this is much clearer, and I think that's helpful. Thanks.
So we just need to make sure the text follows this clearly. Yeah. Okay, and Commissioner Ward?
So my question is about how the rubber hits the road. And so and I recognizing that most people who are packaging items will want to declare that their package is recyclable. And my concern in our rural areas is that folks like, say, people who make cartons will want to proudly declare that their cartons are recyclable, though in rural areas like ours, that's impractical and not going to happen. So is my interpretation correct by if they meet this criteria of accepted in local recycling programs at 60%, that statewide the cartons are going to be able to say accepted in California in recycling programs, and that that's going to be an ongoing educational challenge? Is that correct understanding?
I think that's a possibility, but that is the conditional acceptance, where they would have to present a plan that the commission would review, and ultimately CalRecycle would approve. And I think this body or CalRecycle would say you can't just get 60% acceptance in Southern California. What are you doing with your plan to get acceptance and sortation in the rural areas and facilities? So I think the commission and CalRecycle could hold up conditional acceptance until they demonstrate in their plan that they will do outreach to those rural communities.
So I guess my question is on the conditional acceptance, at what point are the packagers allowed to claim their package is recyclable on item when they reach 75% or 60%?
60% acceptance, 40% sortation, with a plan that has been a conditional plan that's been accepted by the commission and director of CalRecycle.
And in
So
the
if the
case of
commission and
something
the
like
director-
in the case of
The
something
commission
like
and
cartons,
director is not happy with the plan, they don't have to approve it.
So Commissioner Lapis, did you want to respond to that too?
yeah, I'm sorry, Jeff, I really didn't mean to cut you off. So in the case of cartons, yeah, maybe they could get up to the collection number, but they would definitely fail on the sorted into individual bales, because there are some facilities that do it, but definitely not 40. And, they would fail on a lot of the other criteria as well. So they would not be able to call themselves even conditionally recyclable unless they significantly increased, how many people were buying bales of cartons.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Great. And Commissioner Schneider?
Question was, what about acts of God? So all of these materials are accepted, and then we have another case where China shuts its markets down. Is there an ability to look at this over time? Same thing, I hate to go way back, but in the '89 earthquake, the glass markets stopped because 3 plants were offline, and we had a lot of contamination in glass. So just how would we do acts of God in this?
Well, that would be on table 3. We talk about long-term acceptance, conditional acceptance, and then ultimately the removal of items from the list. But if there's a temporary disruption in the market because of earthquakes or other natural disasters, I'm sure CalRecycle would take that into account. It's not an automatic disqualifier. So I think under table 3, where we talk about how somebody gets on or goes off, a lot of that discretion goes into CalRecycle.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think, CalRecycle did a wonderful job when we were having COVID-19, and especially at the beginning of it, and having to deal with what we would do with materials, as obviously we dealt with a lot of issues. And I think they put out a very good guidance. It took a little time, but they put out guidance so that folks could feel comfortable with what they needed to do with materials. So I think if they follow something similar like they did during the COVID-19 emergency, especially at the beginning, that'd be helpful, and I think they would. Just a little bit of an example of what has happened in an emergency.
Okay.
So Jared, if you want to go back up to the language, I think you just heard on the 60%. It's basically 3 on-ramps in this version, 60%, 40%, and then the third is enforceable minimum content requirements, where there's legislation requiring minimum content, that those products would also, or materials would also be on the conditional acceptance. You want to go up, the other up. And down, so that's the 40%, almost. Okay, down. Next paragraph will be there. Product type subject to a minimum recycled content requirement. In California, I think we landed on California minimum recycled content requirement. So there's acceptance at 75% across the board, and then 3 pathways for conditional.
Just a minor thing, that blue sentence right where you were, and should be AN. File and application.
Yeah.
And application. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's an important sentence to cover Cal Recycle's costs. This is putting a lot of work. We put a lot of work on them. But,
Okay. So any questions on this section? I think the tables kind of summarize the text. Maybe we should go to the next. Yeah. Table. Okay, so we added screw type narrow neck tops under PET bottles. So number 1, PET bottles, screw type narrow neck tops.
And that was a suggestion from one of the letters that we received to incorporate just a little expanded definition of PET bottles. So we did, in addition, based on a suggestion from one of the comments to the commission.
And that already says no non-recyclable shrink sleeves, which is what we said in one of the other policies. So this is aligning with that. Okay, let's go to table 3. I've got a lot of new language here. Okay, so new product fact-based pathway to the getting on the recyclable list. So the stage. So if you're not eligible to be on the California recyclable list, separated. So criteria 3 is separated by MRFs into individual bales, separated and reported to CalRecycle by less than 60% of curbside MRFs for 6 of 8 consecutive quarters. Now this is that going to be hard to track? Because that sounds like CalRecycle is going to have a lot of tracking to do.
Correct. So this will set up what CalRecycle will need to do. We're not specifically saying use the RDRS system or another system. They'll have to set up a tracking system, and I'll say similar to the matrix that we use, but they'll have to set up the system to track items that are sorted by the curbside facilities.
And is there a reason you picked 2 years and 6 quarters instead of doing 1 year?
That shows the durability of the product with long-term markets. I mean, if something is not being sorted for 6 of 8 quarters, there's really no market for it.
Okay. And then the data source and evidence is reports submitted to CalRecycle on a quarterly basis. So they're going to have a lot more to do, but they'll also have a lot more information. Okay, so then the conditional acceptance on the statewide recycle list is separated by and reported to CalRecycle by at least 60% of the MRFs for 3 consecutive quarters, and demonstration that 11 additional curbside facilities have agreements to segregate material within 12 months. 11 additional curbside facilities have agreements to segregate.
Yeah, I think, Commissioner Donlevy, the 11 was when you were putting numbers in, how many existing facilities, so it needs to be a percentage.
Yeah,
It needs to reach 15%.
otherwise,
The other
it's
thing, yeah,
snapshot in time.
11 stagnant, right, should be additional 15%, right?
Great.
Additional 15% or 20% to get up to 60%.
No, these are at 60 going to 75.
Oh, yeah.
And then I realized we had used the term tentative in the earlier draft, so this table doesn't reflect the other 2 conditional acceptance pathways. So we should update the 40% pathway and the minimum content pathway.
Okay,
Guide me, John.
Just make a note to update to include the 40% pathway and the minimum content pathway.
okay, we're gonna need your help getting this.
Yeah, we can cut and paste. We can cut and paste from the document to have the language be consistent.
Because this is super
I think,
important.
Yeah, I think the reporting would stay the same. It's going to be based on, although there's some, well, we'll work on it because the plan may have different criteria. That's, I think, the big deal. And then
Okay.
minimum content's going to have its own timeline.
All right, let's go back down. So we'll have to go back and change that language a bit.
Yeah.
And then, is this where we were? Let's see, removal from the statewide recycle, yeah, okay, so full acceptance on the statewide list. Oh, yeah, there we go. Separated and reported to CalRecycle by 75% of the MRFs. And that again is supported by the reports to CalRecycle on a quarterly basis. And then removal from the list is less than 60% of curbside. When you say facilities, is that curbside MRFs, curbside processing facilities?
Yes.
Okay. So we should say, yeah, processing facilities report separating material for 2. I guess the one thing I want to make sure is we're using the same language all the way through, so we're not confusing people. So if we're using MRFs, we should just say MRFs. If we're using processing facilities for curbside, we should just use that all the way through. But I'm seeing both. Is there a preference, Mr. Dunleavy? Do you care if we
No.
pick one or the other? Okay.
Whatever you think will work.
And does anybody have a preference on language there, Commissioner Scott?
I vote for MRF because the idea, processing facilities, people can think it's like PET processing. That's also used over there. So I vote for MRF so that we understand MRF is the first step and then
I agree.
plastic, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anybody who disagrees with that? Okay, and Alex gave a thumbs up, and I saw a few others. Good, okay. So we'll change this throughout. We'll get rid of curbside processing facilities, and we'll talk about MRFs. Okay. And should we say, because this discussion also goes to secondary MRFs, so we say primary MRFs? Because that whole secondary MRF thing, what do you think,
No, there's
Commissioner?
no secondary MRF option.
Not now.
Not in this policy either.
Do we say that?
Yes.
Okay, so it's clear enough. I just want to make sure there's no way to, okay, very good. So we'll change all the curbside processing facilities to MRFs in here, all the way through. That's another change we'll make. And let's see. And this will take time, so we'll have to go back and fix that throughout later, I think. And then we'll go down to the next section whenever you're done there. great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Ward. Okay. So then removal from the list, less than 60% of curbside, again, we'll say of MRFs, report separating material for 2 of 4 consecutive quarters. Okay. So
We'll need to, Ted will need to update that also for the 40% plan and the minimum content performance.
because I'm extremely, I want to really make sure this is explicit. There is no way to misunderstand what is in this policy. Because if it can be misunderstood, it will be, and it's going to cause a lot of headache for CalRecycle and the legislators if we aren't really, really clear and that the tables match the text. Okay, so we'll go through this again, but so far on content, I think we're getting there. Shall we scroll down a little bit more?
Chair Sanborn, I'd put in an asterisk on this.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So earlier we talked about 6 of 8 to be not eligible, and then down here we have 2 of 4, and my concern is 2 of 4 quarters is so much, the recycling markets just change so frequently that I'm worried we'll be changing the list too frequently. I think we should be consistent with those 2, or at least a lot closer.
So it'd be 6 of 8.
That would be my recommendation, unless there's any concerns about that.
I was thinking the same thing. There's just too many different things throughout here.
So
Is there any opposition to that?
this is the reverse of
6 of 8 would show, 6 of 8 would show that the product really has disappeared from the market.
And then 2 of 4 to remove it from the list, because otherwise you're leaving it on too long, is I think probably what you were thinking, correct? Commissioner Levy, yeah. But I mean, if markets are markets, it applies to both. Are there any of the MRF operators that have any thoughts on this? Is what's reasonable? Maybe Commissioners Osagura or Kapikoff. Do you have any thoughts on this? What's reasonable? I guess I feel like
I'm just looking at the language right now, but which one, what are we deleting? Because I'm seeing 4.2 of 4.6. So are we changing that?
so if we could can we get the whole table, those 2 things in the same screen, please? And see if we can show everybody what we're talking about. Okay, it's hard to see it, but in the table, if you're not eligible to be on the statewide recycling list, the condition is that you have to be separated and reported to CalRecycle by less than 60% of curbside MRFs for 6 of 8 consecutive quarters, so 2 years, 3/4 of the 2-year period. If you're going to get removed from the statewide list, it states now that it's less than 60% of curbside or the MRFs separating material for 2 of 4 consecutive quarters. And so Commissioner Sky is saying that's inconsistent. It's a year shorter to remove, but the thought is if you leave it on for 2 years, that's a contamination problem. Do you want it to go on that long? So they both make sense, but do we want consistency? Or do we think it makes sense to?
Or just possibly a higher threshold, because if you have 2 bad quarters, you're off.
Well, I wonder if 18 months is the number. Maybe we just say for both of these that it's an 18-month period. It's basically 6 quarters. And you have to have 3 of the 6 to be removed. And 4 or 5 of 6 to be added.
See, I think Heidi, that makes that makes more sense to me because you will have fluctuations in the marketplace that occur on a short-term basis. And short-term basis, I mean, not even a monthly basis, right? We have price fluctuations on a monthly basis, but what I'm saying is you could have these gyrations over a year's period of time. But once you have an 18 period where you have the experience, it shows you where that is now more, guess that you can make a determination, a more realistic determination. And I would hate also for it to be too short of a time and the list to be continually fluctuating. I think 18 months makes sense to me as I think about our day-to-day operations and specifically of a MRF. Once again, there's gyrations on a monthly basis. Over a year's basis, you might see those fluctuations in terms of the markets. Maybe something goes down, something happens in a place that you're sending materials. But over an 18-month period, you really do start to see the trend. And you will be able to see this is not moving. So I think that makes sense.
Are there any other commissioners that feel that want to weigh in? Is that reasonable? Is that not reasonable to change both of these to basically a year and a half, but we keep the proportion of the quarters the same? Commissioner Sky, did you want to, I think that was an old one, so I don't see any other hands. So it would read then, so to get removed from the list, the MRFs would report separating material for is it 2 of 6? I thought we had that as.
It was 2 of 4.
Right, so it'd be 3 of 6.
3 of 6. Thank you.
Okay, just want to make sure we got the same proportion there.
Then the one above?
Yeah, so then the other one had 6 of 8. So if we go of 6, so would that be, basically, yeah, 4 or 5 of 6. So I guess Commissioner Donlevy, what would make more sense to you?
I think that'll work.
4?
4 is fine because, again, this will be for products coming onto the list. I think those that are on are unquestionable. So I think that'll work.
Okay. So basically the on and off ramps are about 18 months long.
Yep.
And that seems reasonable to everybody. Okay. Because that's very important, and I'm sure that will be debated heavily if this goes to the legislature. Okay. Excellent work there. So is there anything else in this policy that we should discuss right now? Because this is the meat of what's going to count. We don't know what the cost will be. We don't know, we just know what we think is reasonable. And that's our advice. Is everybody feeling good about this now?
Yeah,
Yes.
Can I just, there is one concern, and Commissioner Donlevy and I didn't talk much about it at all, but this assumes that there's legislation allowing Cal Recycle to take over this list, and they're willing and able to do it. But the commission has a list out there, and then the commission has said, we really don't want to be making this list. We think it should be Cal Recycle. But there is a list, and I think we just should be prepared, to be able to revisit that list should we need to. It's out there, even though it doesn't have any enforceability. It's not linked by statute to labeling requirements, but the list is out there. And I think we should just be cognizant of that and be prepared to revisit that if we can, if and when we can.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear. So you're suggesting that we just revisit this all frequently?
Well, we have a list. There's a list that was created by the commission. The policy says Cal Recycle is going to take this over, but it requires legislation. So, getting from here to there could be a year, 2 years, 3 years.
Well, we still have our charge. And if if there's no law that passes, we still have our charge. So we're still going to be addressing this. But I mean, I think it's pretty clear to me that we're being asked to do very heavy lifts here as a volunteer commission. I know we're all giving it our all, but this is really big stuff to have on a volunteer commission. And so I think we just need to say that, because without law and without authority to Cal Recycle to take this over, we're kind of right in the crosshairs here.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up so everybody's
Good point.
on the same page.
Yeah, I
Commissioner
agree.
Sky, next.
Agreed. This is a policy recommendation. We will need legislation to give it authority. If that legislation is passed, then the commission, with our charter, we would review it annually, but ultimately the approval falls at the hands of Cal Recycle.
Yeah,
We're
Commissioner
just an
Sky.
advisory group.
Yep. Commissioner Sky is next, and then Kalbakoff, and then Commissioner Lapis, please.
I had already gotten my comment.
Okay, Commissioner Kalbakoff? I'm sorry, we can't hear you for some reason, but you look unmuted for some reason. Okay. Now it says you're muted. Okay, let's go to Commissioner Lapis real quick until he can figure out. It happens to all of us, don't worry.
I was wondering if we could move this to somewhere higher in the body of the report as opposed to having it as a separate recommendation. It just seems weird to have, this is our factual determination of what we think is recyclable in California, which is, and it includes a policy recommendation, but it really isn't altogether a policy recommendation. And it's also weird for it to be like number 15 when it was such a core part of what we were supposed to do. I'm wondering if we should just have a section at the beginning that is called what is recyclable in California.
Well, we did talk about the report already. And so I would suggest that you go into the report and track changes as to where you would like to see that added. And then Commissioner Ward and I are happy to kind of change the story around a bit. And I agree, it should be much higher because it's a very big, policy for us, and it's very important and very impactful. So I totally agree. But if you could tell us where you think that should go on the report and type that in so everybody can see it on the Google Doc, that'd be very helpful.
Before I do that, if I could just kind of get a quick sense of folks, do people agree with that? Would you support not having it as a numbered policy, but having it as in the narrative beginning section?
Oh, that's different. I wouldn't recommend it be in the report itself. It would still be a recommendation attached because the report is just gets too long. And the attachments can be updated. And this is a very important policy that if we figure out we did something that we need to change, if it's in the report, it's harder. It's easier for legislators to separate it and for us to separate it. And we can talk about it in the report and move it up in the report, but I would still recommend, my preference would be it attached. And as a person writing the report and taking all the time to keep manipulating it, I would appreciate not having to continue to remanipulate that much. It's huge. So I don't know if anybody else feels strongly about that, but this is taking a lot of time to write as it is. That's okay. I don't think it's going to diminish the importance of this if we move it higher and make it a priority the way we talk about it.
Okay.
Commissioner Ward, we've already outlined the report.
Yeah, and I welcome anybody who wants to add text setting the importance and context of any particular policy proposal. I think that's helpful. And
We are
we
at the
can
point
only
where we-
track so much, but that's the text we need. And I think so anybody's going to have their particular policy proposal, and we're always going to be fussing about order. I agree it's a core thing, but I think the way to approach the importance of this is just that introduction.
Okay.
I'll just be very honest. I mean, we both have other jobs and we cannot keep up changing this thing over and over again. So I'll just, if you've got any language you want in, please do the Google Doc. And then when he and I go back to it, probably by the end of this week, we'll just start incorporating those changes. But I think it's a great idea to move it up higher as a number too. Commissioner Kalbakoff, can you unmute yourself so you can speak?
Yeah, can you hear
There
me?
you go. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. New computer today. My question was on the legislation, I think, and I believe I answered it. So the list would not need to go as an assembly bill or something as leg, but the change for the director of CalRecycle to update that list or create the list would need legislation. Is that correct? I'm confused a little bit.
Commissioner
Yeah,
Lapis nodding, or Davis, go ahead.
Yeah, that's my understanding, that the commission developed a list, and that list is the commission's list, but so it's a standalone list. The policy really refers to presumption that there'd be legislation giving CalRecycle the ability to enforce that policy. So there's a commission list out there, and then there's a policy about going forward with the list.
So our list, CalRecycle could not follow our list or enforce our list? Is that the question? I don't know.
Presumably they could if they adopted it. They don't have the authority now to enforce any list.
Yeah. Right.
The commission has the ability to create a list, but we have no
There's
enforcement.
no enforcement authority.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
It'll
So
be,
there's going to be a period of time when this list is there, but it's there.
well, it's there. Other states are looking at it. Other legislation is currently in play, looking at what gets on and off. So there's going to be, once it's out there, it's still going to have an impact, but we won't be enforcing it. We're just going to simply be advising, and we might say, hey, we need this done quicker because things are not happening. You asked us to help reduce contamination, but you got to follow up on the recommendation, legislature or CalRecycle or whomever. We could do that at some point if it's not happening. Okay, I just want to say how proud I am of everybody for coming together and finding what feels like we might be able to vote on this now as a consensus document. This was not easy, and I really sincerely appreciate the work that Commissioners Donlevy and Davis did to come together in the last 2 weeks and pound this out. So I would like to ask now if I hear a motion to approve this as it's written with the changes that we have adopted, knowing that it'll be all clean and pretty, and the little changes we talked about today will be on the June 2nd agenda as the final, which gives everybody another chance to look at it and give us comments. Do I hear a motion?
Chair
Yeah.
Sanborn, I motion that the policy is approved with the changes that you're mentioning, and move forward to a final vote.
I second that motion.
Then we got a first and a second. All commissioners that support, thumbs up. Mr. Lapis and a few that I can't see, and Commissioner Ferrante, I am assuming you're okay. If not, please speak now.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have a unanimous 16-0 vote in support of Policy 15. Congratulations. That was a really, really hard thing to do. Very, very proud of everybody for your work on this. Thank you again so much. So I would only ask at this point that Commissioners Donlevy and Davis get back together and finish the minor changes we just discussed. Commissioner Ward can send it to you. He can actually accept all the changes that were made today, send it to you to make sure those little, MRF changes and things were made correctly, and then you can send it to us to upload for the June 2nd. Excellent work. Okay, so now we're going to move on, and we are now at 10:04, and we have to keep moving. The next one I'm going to take up is the gypsum proposal. This was Commissioner Toyota and I. We were working as a two-person committee under the Market Development Committee for C&D. We've had this discussion for several months over in the Market Development Committee. And I guess I'm just going to lead off this discussion very quickly, and Commissioner Toyota can weigh in. The bottom line is the policy proposal we put up, you'll note, says final proposal for commission discussion. And the reason we said discussion is that when we got heard from the Gypsum Association, they said that it was not reasonable the percentages were way off of what they thought they could do as recycled content and drywall. They're thinking 4% by 2025, and we were thinking 10% by 2023. So we were way off. We had a long talk with them. 5 of their 6 members have come back and given us this proposal, which I put in the Google document. And basically what it says is they have committed to working with us, Commissioner Toyota and I would welcome anyone from Cal Recycle. Again, this is not our full-time job. And deal with the issues that they consider the biggest problems. The biggest problem for them is they cannot get clean drywall in volume to bring it to a drywall to drywall process. They were concerned about the number of haulers available to do that. I suggest that there's probably not a problem with that haulers just haul things, and if you pay them, they will haul things. But if somebody wants to correct me on that, please let me know. And we have to come up with incentives really to get this clean drywall back. So if anybody else would like to work on this and we want to form a bigger group, that's fine. Otherwise, Commissioner Toyota and I put language in the draft report that gives its introduction that we started down the road of a policy, but we've agreed to work with the Gypsum Association. And basically by November, December, we'll see how fast we can move and what we can accomplish. But this is really kind of low-hanging fruit because we can use it for ag and we can use it to make it into drywall. We just need to get it collected in a clean way. So I just want to open it for public comment, and I do see that we have a public comment.
Yes, we have one public comment from Amanda Kaminsky. It says, good morning, commissioners. My comments pertain to the Gypsum Association proposal posted to Commission Docs yesterday, 5/18/21, regarding drywall recycling. On minimum post-consumer recycled content, the GA proposes an average minimum 4% post-consumer content across gypsum panel production beginning in 2025. This is not an improvement from current practice. Current industry average drywall post-consumer content is already 4.2%, with 3.8% from paper-facing backing, plus 0.4% from post-consumer gypsum. See Table 2 material content, page 8 to 9 of the Gypsum Association industry average Type X gypsum panel EPD, and then a hyperlink, published on 4/28/2020. Per Gypsum Association, paper facers have been made from recycled paper for more than 50 years. Another link. A higher minimum post-consumer gypsum content is needed per this proposal submitted to Market Development Commission and the full commission, or committee and full commission. This can happen via policy establishing a higher overall product, paper and gypsum, minimum post-consumer content, or a dedicated gypsum minimum post-consumer content in new drywall. The rest of the comment is published.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for your comments, and Ben for reading it. Commissioner Sky.
Thank you. So just broadly, the difficulty of a recycling rate to reach is not really a good reason for us to not consider the proposal. I mean, we're tasked with a nearly impossible goal of 75% recycling, but we're still developing a number of policies to help us get there. So if we have time, I'd really like for this commission to consider the policy that was put forward. It can certainly be further adjusted based on stakeholder input, but I think we should be setting, and I don't know that 10% is a particularly ambitious goal, but I'd like to have that discussion and see if we have consensus, at least among the commissioners, to move that forward.
Okay, I will tell you that they've told us that there's only 10 to 12% of drywall that's considered clean wasted drywall. The rest is from demolition, which is too dirty for them to really recycle. They haven't figured out how to do that well yet. So, you know, if you want to take this up as a policy now, Commissioner Toyota and I are certainly happy to discuss that and just change the numbers. But I can tell you the industry association is going to fight it, and they couldn't even get 6 members to agree to 4% by 2025. But that's normal for us. We deal with this all the time. Commissioner Ward, I see you have your hand up.
Two things on this. One is that to meet the overall 75% recycling recovery goal, construction and demolition materials are absolutely going to be forefront of that, and generally construction materials will have to have a higher percentage of recycled content than most other materials because of their preponderance of the materials used. With respect to drywall, there's a lot of different options, but I would say that recovery at higher levels of drywall won't be possible without deconstruction being regularly deployed. As long as demolition, where you mix it all together and then try to separate it out later, that doesn't work unless you have facilities that are already set to do that. So most situations, most communities, you're going to have deconstruction if you're going to have high drywall recoveries, in my opinion.
Well, that's again the dirty drywall. That's not the clean drywall that this policy would really be focusing on. I mean, to me, the big thing is we have to give incentives to the people that are installing drywall to keep it clean and separated and not just throw it in the dumpster on top of the carpet and everything else that's in there, because that's what's contaminating the carpet scraps. It's contaminating other C&D materials, quite frankly. So to me, clean drywall is an important thing to get out and separated because we do have markets for it. But it's going to take an incentive by the people that are installing it to keep it separate and clean and then have a place to bring it. So it's up to you. If you want to go proceed with a policy, we'll have to we've got the policy written. I would just reduce the number because now I know that 10%, if only 10% is wasted that's clean, I think we've got to make sure our numbers are not outrageous for them to meet. But I mean, maybe it's 6% by 2025 or any other thoughts? Commissioner Schneider.
In terms of, I see where you're going with market development, but, and I'm basing this on the fact that we're rebuilding our recreation center using one of the largest builders in California, and everything on the job site right now is being mixed. I wonder if the first step is we simply enforce job site separation.
Well, but that takes money, and then we'd have to say who's going to.
Does it really though, Chair? I'm sorry. You know, for decades we've been talking about in construction job site separation for materials, and then they get the same thing. Oh, just mix it all together. Well, no, it doesn't work well when it's mixed all together. And I would wish that the state of California said, hey, local governments, you've got to enact your own, or you've got to enforce your own existing demolition and deconstruction ordinances, which we are not doing here. And I'll tell you right now, I am in a discussion with my city manager, with our engineer on this project, saying I'd like to see separation. And I'm just a little elected official and it's not getting me anywhere. If we simply enforced what we had on the books, we would be getting better materials for markets. That's not requiring the service providers to do it. It's requiring the builders to do it. And the builders could be the at-home remodeler, which we have a lot of here in Millbrae, but which in our case, it's got to be done in multiple languages, and it has to be enforced. If you've watched the governor's latest thing about cleaning up how dirty our roads are, and the request is to get more people out there cleaning up the litter, no, the request is enforcing the covered load ordinance. We just have to be tougher on enforcement.
I'm going to ask Ben if there's any more public comment, because I'm hearing there is.
None have made it through the portal yet, but I'll keep my eye on it.
Okay. Then Commissioner Medrano and then Sky again, please.
Just quickly, if we were to lower the thresholds of the recycled content requirement, what is that based on? Is it our own assumption or with the work of the industry representative?
It would be based on their data that only 10 to 12% of what is made becomes a waste. So this again is just the clean drywall as it's getting installed when they cut it, not putting it in the garbage pile, but keeping it separate, because that clean drywall has not been painted, it hasn't been contaminated in any way. So if we want to put it into ag mix or back into drywall, we're confident it gets very messy when you start dealing with demolition drywall.
Understood. Thank you.
And Commissioner Toyota, please chime in at any time on this since you've done so much work on it. Commissioner Sky?
I was just going to say that I've visited facilities in LA County that get material from demolition that is clean drywall that is recycled. It is possible to do. And it gets to the heart of what our commission has been advocating, which is reduce the amount of waste that's generated. If you mix up material, if you don't have incentives for deconstruction, then absolutely it's going to be nearly impossible to recover this material. So I know that a lot of us have to leave early today. I have to head off by 11:30 as well. But if we have the time to consider this policy, I'd like to do that. If it needs more time or if we need more presentations from the companies that have done it, then maybe we push this off till after the June report.
Then I'm going to make a suggestion real quick that we take up the mixed C&D policy, and because it's directly related to this, and we could actually add something into that policy from the gypsum, if that's okay. And Commissioner Davis, did you want to say something before we move to that?
No, I'm ready to move, but I did want to point out, I think there's, Washington State actually banned drywall from disposal because of the moisture interaction and gas, off-gassers. So there's some lessons to be learned there about the content. And as you know, there is gypsum that's used for soil amendment in California. So I think that's another factor that we need to take into consideration.
Policy. It sure seems like there's additional discussion on this one. I hate to rush through something and then we don't get it right. And, you know, we lose some credibility versus what we have done. And we've seen it, those things coming and going into the legislature as potential bills and law. And so I just want to remind everyone of that. I mean, if this needs additional discussion, I don't know if there's a need to rush it right now from what I've been hearing on this call so far.
Well, and this is what Commissioner Toyota and I came to, is that we have the industry eager to work with us, and that's not always the case. So if they are willing to spend some time to really sit down with us and dig into this for a few months, we can come back at any time and say it's time to do a policy. Either we could agree or we couldn't agree. But we were kind of thinking the same thing. So let me take the public comment that I'm hearing is now available.
Yes, it's from Susan Hines with the Gypsum Association. It says the previous proposal was unrealistic and lacked the input of the gypsum industry and the Gypsum Association. We cannot support an effort that will fail, which the previous proposal would.
And there you have it, which is why we were putting the pause on this long enough to at least work with them and come up with something. Hopefully very quickly, because we all know that we're running out of time to get this all right. I think at this point, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to put pause on this for a second and move to a policy on recovering resources from mixed C&D debris, because I think they're directly related and we can decide on both of them after we hear the second one. So I think with this one, I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Toyota. She's done a whole lot of work on this.
Sure. Thank you. I think you're right. This might get to the heart of a lot of the conversation we've been having over the gypsum policy. This came out of efforts that they were doing in San Francisco, where they came to realize that the 65% diversion, they couldn't enforce it, more or less. They couldn't watch it the way most local governments can't do. Is 65% really going where it's supposed to go? Is this happening the way it's supposed to happen? Is everything working the way it should? And then, and what they found was that basically it isn't. That we need to change how we handle mixed C&D. And so ultimately, the proposal comes down to a few things that I think are really important, in that they, at least in areas that are not considered rural or smaller areas, that you can't, they prohibited direct haul to landfilling. Basically, everything that's mixed C&D has to go to a processing facility. And on top of that, the processing facility has to be third-party verified. There were a lot of issues about a processing facility that had to meet 65% of diversion that couldn't, because what came to their door wasn't 65% of it wasn't recyclable or divertible, so they didn't want it. And what San Francisco really wanted to get to the heart of was, well, what can we divert? Can we divert 100%? Can we make the goal diverting 100% of what is actually divertible? Can we recycle 100% of what is recyclable? And once we get to that point, then we can sit down and take a look realistically at, okay, what isn't recyclable and how do we get to that point with this? The way the system is set up right now is it's basically we're trying to hit a 65% number that doesn't really tell us or help us get to diversion. In other words, 100% of what's divertible, and then what is not right now divertible. How do we handle that? What are the conversations about that, about processing and so forth? So if none of the mixed C&D can go to a landfill, it has to go to a third-party verification, and then there has to be enforcement through CalGreen that basically everything is being processed the way it's supposed to be processed. And another really important part of this proposal is that if they are third-party verified, that they can actually certify less than 65%. In other words, the reality of what is actually getting diverted and what isn't. What is truly the baseline at this point? So that you're not, I guess, incentivizing the idea that or incentivizing people. I don't like the word to cheat, but to basically say you're hitting 65 and you're not, because you have to, and then that doesn't tell us anything about the baseline and about what we really need to do. So it allows for third-party verified processing facilities to basically say, look, we're not diverting 65%. This is what we are diverting. So now we can turn to how do we move the rest of it? How do we have a real conversation about increasing C&D diversion rates? So this gets, I think, to the heart of a lot of what we were talking about. It doesn't necessarily work in smaller areas, rural areas, because ultimately you have to have the processing facilities, you have to have the capability. We need to build that in those areas before it could work there. So there were a lot of conversations about how to handle that, and it basically came back to just following the determinations and the determinations from 1383. It follows those same, it draws the lines in the same place. This is what's rural. This is where you can apply for a waiver and so forth.
Okay, so I think that's
yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, we're getting there. I think it's just that this is exactly what we were talking about in the other item. If we don't have clean sorted material, we can't find markets for it. And so this policy would set up a third-party verification system for C&D facilities so that they are truly third-party certified, that they are diverting what they say they're diverting, because they are unfortunately incentivized right now to not tell the truth and to over-exaggerate about what's getting diverted. And if we don't do this, we're losing all the C&D. I just had several large projects done on my new home, and I can't even begin to explain the waste that was in that dumpster that I was paying for. My husband was horrified. We were pulling lumber out of that thing. They took our hardwood floor by mistake, and they threw that in there. It was just waste, waste, waste. And they said, oh, the county's going to divert it. They have a sort system when we show up there. But I thought, it's all dirty. All the gypsum's been thrown in there. It's all contaminated at that point. So to me, this is a very important policy because we're losing a lot of really good, valuable materials. And if anybody's done a building project in the last 6 months, you'll understand the price of lumber is skyrocketing. everything is back ordered, and we are wasting beautiful material that could be used again and literally not chopping down forests. So I think this is a very important policy to consider. We did a lot of consultation with the experts in San Francisco, and we feel very confident that this is a good proposal. So happy to take comments. And also I want to hear if there are any more public comments on the gypsum, because I'm hearing there is one from Ben.
I'm still waiting for that to come through.
Yeah, somebody was telling me they put it in twice and it's not getting to you somehow. Okay, Commissioner Ward, and then
Just wanted to express my support for this policy and my appreciation for Commissioner Toyota working with the rural counties to try to make a policy that makes sense for the whole state. Really.
Thank you. Commissioner Schneider?
I would agree. I like everything, but can you remind me what kind of enforcement is going to be asked of the cities for their program? Do we have anything in there? And I'm sorry I didn't look at it last night, so it's not fresh in my brain.
Cities. Actually, it calls out the issue that cities are really unable to, they don't really have the expertise to enforce this, really, and to make sure that it's handled in the right way. And it actually calls on Cal Green to be an enforcement agency for this at site.
Now we haven't.
And yet the only one, I'm sorry, the only one on the street in a remodel or a tear down, because we're in our monster house period right now. So tear down of perfectly good homes is through Planning Commission or Planning Department. And we have the ordinance and they sign it and then they don't do anything. So until, to me, you're going to still get those dirty materials in a dumpster delivered to a mixed processing facility, and you won't be able to recover the really reusable stuff because that has to happen at the job site. So I mean, I don't want to slow this down. It is critical, but until we require local governments in their planning departments with their code enforcement people to actually do this when they're out on the job site, it is not going to happen. And I can look at 3 projects within a half a block of my house where it is not happening, and how frustrated it is that I know the right way. All you have to do is require a site separation plan, and then when the inspector comes in, he checks off on it.
Well,
but if we don't ask it, it's not going to happen.
Well, I could just speak to the difference between having passing local policy and passing state policy that tells local governments what to do and how popular that is.
I get you. I get you. I am local government right now. At the same time, this is a huge percentage of material and a huge CO2 factor. So, you know, at some point, it has to be enforced.
Well, we have not written it that way for a reason, because politically it's extremely challenging, and I don't think it would get support from League and CSAC and others. So I think we have what we've got. And if anybody else has comments, did we have a public comment that's coming in now, maybe?
Yes, actually 2 have come in. One is from Zanker Recycling. It says, Zanker Recycling in San Jose has been recycling small volumes of drywall for over 25 years. We are not able to invest in real equipment unless there is a real market for the finished product. Having manufacturers have to purchase recycled materials that meet their specifications is critical to developing a real market for wallboard. And then the second comment is from Gail Bryce with XT Green. It says, please consider the following change in the gypsum policy. Carpet is being contaminated now by drywall removal. Rather than waiting for 2025, can you separate the following in the gypsum policy? Quote, require source separation of demolition and remove renovated drywall scrap on job sites starting in 2025, end quote, and add, quote, require the carpet to be removed from demolition sites prior to removal of drywall. Those are both published.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Okay.
I'm sorry, through the chair. So you want us to vote on this right now, and I'm feeling very stubborn on this. So I'm trying to come up with an alternative. If we want to move this now, which to me is something great, Cal Recycle will do it, the state will do it, and then it'll trickle down to local governments. and nothing will happen, especially when your construction company doesn't speak English. Can we come back and address enforcement of existing rules at a later date? I talked to the League of California City Lobbyists, and, you know, they're the ones that we also need for 1365, or am I doing it? 1383. 1383, we need local government to come along and learn that they've got a place to enforce it. And it isn't that difficult because you've got inspectors out there anyway. So if I can't sell it today, can we come back and address it at a later date?
We can take
You know
a
what? How about in the policy? Maybe I can bring it up. Okay, let me try something really quick. Okay, so can you see number 3, establish and enforce minimum diversion recovery requirements through CalGreen with requirements being enforced at the point of debris generation. Maybe we can add something with including local governments, or include local governments, or work with local governments, or something like that. Would that make you feel a little bit more comfortable?
Thank you for that. Could you possibly make that slightly bigger?
And while you're doing that, Commissioner Ward had a comment.
Yeah, I think Cal Green is enforced at the local level, so I think actually these two comments are entirely in sync. But because no, you don't think Cal Green is enforced at the local level?
Well, I think what I'm being told by my staff is, oh, that's Cal Green and it's all in the ordinance and therefore it's going to happen. When you actually get to the job site, it is not happening, both on a city commission project and on 3 house remodels around the corner from my house. So I've got both a residential and a commercial operation. And in fact, we have a huge TOD project, 4 buildings, not happening. Just telling you, it's not happening. So going back to Sarah's number 3, I lost that page. Sarah, could you bring that
Sorry
back?
about that. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, Ted, we have a deconstruction ordinance here, and a person or an entity will get their permit and they'll check the box and that's it. And I can tell you when I walk around, it doesn't happen.
Well, I have my sympathies for you, but you're describing a situation that's fairly common in local government, but just because local government is responsible and they're not enforcing their policies doesn't make it a state problem. I think it still remains a local government problem, Madam Mayor.
Okay, I hear you saying that. So, but how can Cal Recycle put more pressure on local government?
Well, by passing this policy, we're basically, you know, giving Cal Recycle more, I would say, support to address this with Cal Green.
Okay, I'm looking at number 3. I like that, Chair Sanborn, if that is indeed in it.
Well, the policy itself is basically, and this is in another agenda item under legislation, but I wanted to bring up the budget revision and the new department that's being proposed in the budget and how that can help us and how I believe it's coming out of several of our recommendations. And it does, I think, help us with this issue, but it's not time to talk about that. So.
Okay. All right. I'll support this. I'm just hesitant because stuff in writing, when it trickles on down, if it's not happening, then.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think we all agree with you that enforcement is key. So the question is, if we get this into this report now, it's there, and then we can discuss whether the enforcement at Cal Green is happening or not. And we can decide if we want to update this policy or make a different recommendation at a later time, but at least it's making it into the July 1st report, because if we don't get something about source separation of mixed C and D in this report, I think it's a big miss for the commission.
Okay.
With the amount of volume.
I appreciate that, Chair. Then if we could just put for the next year to come back and look at Cal Green.
Yeah, well, I mean, Commissioner Toyota and I are not going to stop until this thing works, because we've identified a huge problem here, and we're going to help solve it. And Commissioner Segura, did you want to say something?
Just I just want to make sure to highlight that we always have to consider the demand, the market demand, and there's a robust market along with when we begin the separation, right? We've heard from folks here that saying we can only use X. You know, some folks concerned about how much if it was separated. My concern is always that we don't run into the same issues we have in other markets, right? That we go and separate a tremendous amount of materials, then those materials do not have a home, then those materials end up where? And then the question is, well, did you do it on purpose? Why did you do that? I mean, and it gets back, was there a robust market? So I agree with you, Chair Sammer, that there needs to be a policy. I just want to make sure to always remind the commission, the commissioners, there has to be market demand and a robust market for these materials once they're sorted, or else it turns into a big issue again, right? So.
Excellent point, and this is
One
the
of the
check.
things about,
Go ahead.
one of the things about this policy is it means to get to that. It's just that there's no baseline. And so, you know, once we can figure out what actually has a home for real, then we can start looking at, okay, this doesn't have a market. How do we focus on that and start to move this other material?
Well, we're always in the chicken and egg. You know, we can't develop markets if it's all dirty. We can't separate it if there's no markets. So we're in this weird place right now trying to figure out how do we get both boats lifting up at the same time. So we're getting cleaner and cleaner material while we're developing the markets. And I think that's why we're appreciative for the Gypsum Association to come to the table. On gypsum, we need more help on a whole bunch of stuff. We're talking to the shingle manufacturers. We're talking to Caltrans. You know, we're trying to do both at the same time. And I think that's also what the budget proposal is in the state at the state level, which we can talk about again under the legislative piece. And Commissioner Kalpikoff?
Yeah, I just want to, thanks Commissioner Oseguera, by the way. There are obviously different geographic regions will have outlets and markets for certain items, and then there's going to be regions that don't have it based upon, you know, their content. So it's not like, it's a little bit different than the bottle and then I guess the curbside where we can set this list. But I mean, with this study, it's got to be looked at regionally as well, what materials are accepted. And I don't know how we put that in there. So one area doesn't offset the rest of the state by having markets and one area doesn't.
And that's also a very common problem that we have regional markets, not statewide markets. And so I think we should be very careful to write into all our policies that we have to take in regional considerations on all of these. So I would suggest that this is as ready as we can get it right now, and that it's very important, and I think it is well thought through. It might not be perfect, but I'm not sure we'd say that about any of our policies. They're all kind of plan, do, check, adjust, plan, do, check, adjust, and we can check and adjust in the next 6 months for any updates if we find that we need them. So is there anyone who'd like to make a motion on this?
I'll move to approve this policy.
Thank you, Commissioner Sky.
I second.
And that's Commissioner Medrano. Thank you. All those in favor, thumbs up. And thank you. And then do I see Commissioner Delaferrante? Are you okay?
Yes.
Great. And Del okay? Awesome. Thumbs up. Okay. So we did not get back to the gypsum, but we did approve the mix C and D, and this is first reading really to go into the final report. So we'll do second reading on this at the next meeting. And then that would be into the report as a final by June 1st, or June 2nd will be the final. And so I think on gypsum, I'm hearing mixed messages, kind of. We all want to do something, but what is it that we do, and doing it thoughtfully? And we've got an industry group that's saying they're willing to work with us. I believe that. And I'd like to give them a shot at doing it, because if we move too fast and we make a mistake, I think it's going to backfire. So I'd like to give them a few months to try and work with us, and then hold this policy in abeyance, and give Commissioners Toyota and I a few months to work with them and report back maybe in September. Is that okay? Thumbs up, everybody? Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you to Susan and the Gypsum Association for being willing to work with us. we look forward to it, and time is of the essence, as everybody said, because we're way behind on our 75% goal. Okay.
And on the
Chair
chip,
Sanborn.
I just like.
I'm sorry, Ben, why don't you go ahead and then we'll
Yeah,
do.
go ahead, Ben.
There are two public comments, one on C&D and one on gypsum.
Okay, let's hear those first, please.
On C&D from Stephen Bantillo of the Recycling Certification Institute, says RCI supports the C&D policy proposal. We often hear the phrase quality versus quantity, which elicits a sense of conflict, as if to suggest the two are mutually exclusive. In the current landscape of rules and regulations for C&D recovery, C&D facilities are being pressed to achieve higher quantities for covered materials, while at the same time the markets are demanding higher quality materials. Do we forego one in pursuit of the other? The answer should be no. Both are achievable, but we must look at solutions from a more holistic perspective. The conflict between the two will always be present if rules and regulations demand high recovery rates above all else. A key challenge is that there is only so much a facility can recover from the materials it receives. You can't make a silk purse from a sew's ear, and the markets are increasingly sensitive to the quality. The rest of the comment is posted. And then on gypsum from Gail Bryce at XT Green, there is a robust market for post-consumer carpet. CARE recently awarded $1 million in grants to recycle commercial broadloom carpet. These facilities are now accepting commercial carpet. It would be very helpful if the gypsum policy included removing carpet before the drywall. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you for the comments. Thank you, Mr. Bentillo. It's good to know you all support the policy we just adopted. Heard your comment, unfortunately, afterwards, but I'm glad that you do support it. And to Gail, we'll take this up again and stay working with the Gypsum Association. I'm sure they've heard those comments. Thank you. Okay, so we've got to keep moving. Commissioner Ward?
Just briefly on the gypsum, I think when you talk to the association, I would explore the development of minimum content standards for gypsum and see whether or not that's practical, because we need to drive the market forward.
I would agree. Okay, so we will, I'm sure they've heard that as well, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. The next item I'd like to take up is another market development item that has been heard multiple times, once before the commission already. This will be the second read, and this is producer responsibility for market development. So I'll turn this now over to Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, this proposal was initiated by then Commissioner Potashner, and we have. Would you like me to show it, or how are we doing?
Well,
Yeah, if you don't mind, John, I think that would work best.
Okay, let me bear with me here.
And there's quite a few. The graphics changes are very significant, so I hope everybody's had a chance to look at this.
Yeah, we've spent time trying to reconcile the language and the graphics, and then as Commissioner Potashner left, it became a bit more of a challenge. But Sarah Toyota and I worked on trying to get that. And somehow I'm frozen here. Okay. There were just following the commission discussion on this. There were really just a few changes at the Market Development Committee. Commissioner Osigara joined us. We worked back through to make sure that we had clarity in the proposal. The essence of the proposal is that producers of covered products form producer responsibility organization. We're using that term, PRO, and submit a plan to CalRecycle and meet the following requirements. So this is kind of a broad brush picture. The focus on producer responsibility and existing recycling programs. So PRO must pay for processing of covered material if the scrap value is less than the cost of recycling the material. So it's similar to one of the standards that we had in the recyclable discussion.
Hey, John.
Yes.
While you happen to be right there, just before Cal Recycle, you can delete the as well.
Yeah. Not the Cal Recycle.
Good call.
Yeah. And I don't have track changes on here. Get that going.
That's just a minor detail. We should keep going, but it is important to get this.
Okay, well, let me turn it on in case we have one. Okay. So the idea is to get a processing payment that covers the type of material, to allow the material to be recovered to the contamination quality standard. And then second bullet, unchanged, may need to consider regional differences. That's important. I think as we know, size of facilities, distance to markets. If the plan includes plastics packaging, it must provide for programs and performance goals to meet the standards for single-use packaging and products. We took out number 4. This was language that we kind of struggled with and replaced it with a new number 4. So everything from there became it was left in place. But the notion of a stable and reliable market, we had a lot of discussion, particularly around the graphic that I'll get to, about what that meant, and finally decided that this was really the only reference in there to market. There was a market payment or market development payment in one of the early drafts, but of the graphic, but that went away. So pulled out number 4, made minimum changes to the remainder, and then here's the graphic. Sorry, I skipped ahead here. That's the last edit in so whoops, graphic. Yeah, so we went over this graphic quite a few times. We had comment from Susan Collins about the impact on buyback operations. So rather than the normal, the first draft had recycle bin to hauler to MRF to reclaimer. We intercepted that with the drop-off buyback and also donations, since areas, there's issues at thrift stores, for example, about handling materials. So everything that feeds to a recycler is now in this loop. There's a product design consideration, just kind of standard producer responsibility goal. It's the product manufacturer level, new products, retailers. So kind of puts it in that circular economy draft with few changes to the normal.
Commissioner Davis, can you hold for just a second? I think Commissioner Ward has a question, then I have a question.
Okay.
Just briefly, in terms of the symbology of the symbol, if you take a quick glance at it, it looks remarkably like the universal don't symbol. So I would suggest you take that middle line and make it more like a yin-yang symbol. You make that a squirrely middle line so that when they quickly glance at the symbol, it looks more like a yin-yang than it looks like a don't recycle.
Yeah, I had noticed that as well. I have to tell you, we've probably gone through 8 different variations here, but I'll take that comment back to the artist and think about how to do that. Yeah.
So, that's good. And then this idea, and my question is, can you clarify what exactly are the covered products here? Because what this is basically saying is we're asking for producer responsibility for a variety of products and not clear exactly which ones. So they don't have to take back their product, but they have to develop the market. And so
they have to support the processing. This is really a processing support. The idea is the covered material. So in my view, this supports what we talked about on the recyclability. What is recyclable? To continue to have price support for this. So, and that the support would actually go to the processing.
And how would this, so which products are we suggesting CalRecycle, would the legislature apply this to? And if there's already, for example, stewardship organizations for mattresses or carpet or some paint, would they be required to add this, or are they exempted from this?
I believe, and again, you know, Mr. Katasher is not here. I believe the intent was that when covered products under a producer responsibility framework, that this would apply. It's a means to assure that the existing recycling system is a part of any producer responsibility system going forward.
Or recommending that existing programs be updated to include this? Because we wouldn't ask them to establish a new PRO for market development if they've already got CARE or Paint Care or Thermostat Recycling Corporation.
Yeah, well, you know, carpet, for example, if you're at if a MRF accepts carpet, they can charge for it. CARE hauls it away. You know, should the gate rate charge be the dominant way to pay for the processing? If the processing is less than the value of the material, the mattress organization runs it differently, and so they allow a processing charge. So, you know, you've got different scenarios. This is basically saying if you're going to use a MRF to process, then there has to be sufficient value in the material.
Commissioner Lapis, yes, thought?
Yeah, I think if I understood Eric's intent originally, I think this was meant to be for product packaging and single-use items, sort of within the scope of something like an SB 54. I don't think it was meant to replace or to go beyond that for things like hard to handle, hazardous materials. And I mean, I'm curious what everybody's take on this is. I think it's potentially a really neat, clean way to thread the needle on what a producer responsibility organization system could look like that would still support our existing recycling infrastructure. And this is actually a pretty monumental proposal. I mean, I don't know if that's getting lost in the shuffle a little bit, but this was something that was discussed repeatedly in the process of SB 54 and was never fully resolved. And I know it was discussed in Oregon and Washington as well. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. And then just one minor thing, I feel slightly uncomfortable having Eric's name on this since we keep making changes.
I agree.
I would just hate to say he's responsible for this thing that he didn't write half of.
Really, I think it should be at this point Commissioner Davis and Toyota, because Commissioner Potashner started it, but he's not here anymore, and it's, yeah, I agree. Are you okay with that, Commissioner Davis, or do you want your name on? Do you want a different?
I'll be glad to take credit for Eric's work, but
Okay, so we'll change that. And Commissioner Segura?
Yeah, I just think, let me, you know, adding to what Commissioner Lapis was mentioning, I think this is an attempt to thread the needle. I think is also what's important is that it truly highlights that the state of California and its municipalities, plus their subcontractors, have built a system that works well. And I think sometimes that's lost in the conversation, right? There's a system of collection. There's a system that incorporates education and outreach. There's a system that includes processing of materials. And there's a need for enhancements, especially after what happened with China. I think as the policy's written, it actually, I think, highlights that there's a good functioning system with the need for enhancements versus something that needs to be completely over. And why I like the policy as written is I think it highlights that. And once again, I want to highlight and be repetitive here. there's a good functioning system. How do we make it better is the question, and what are the issues versus a need for replacing a system that actually is performing well and performs well when compared to many programs across the U.S. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, and I've said repeatedly, we've got one of the best infrastructures in the country, and just giving full authority to a PRO that really, an industry group who doesn't seem very excited about taking it over. We've seen how well that worked with Carpet and some other products. So I think it's important that we really look carefully at this, but I think it's also important we're clear who's writing it, and we're clear what it covers or does not. And so that I don't think has been made clear in here. This just says very generally producer responsibility for market development. Maybe it should say producer responsibility for market development for non-hazardous materials or products that are not under an existing stewardship program. Because if they're under an existing stewardship program, you can always amend that program. But you wouldn't want the producers to have two.
And that's why, I mean, it might be important in the first paragraph to change the producers of covered products must. We might use the word can for a producer responsible organization. Because where there's functioning markets and things are working, why would you need to? And so that might be an important thing to place here. That'd be probably a good change.
Okay. Commissioner Ward, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think clarifying what this covers is really good. And as I was looking at the two market development proposals and trying to start to craft an introduction section, what became clear to me is that the market development the EPR proposals essentially addressed hazardous materials or things that were problematic in the waste stream, or items that essentially were in desperate need of market development. So those seem to be the two ways that EPR was a go-to strategy. And so if it could be clarified in this proposal that this one is the market development side, when you have no markets, EPR can be helpful in developing those markets, and this is how. I think clarifying that would be helpful.
But this would be very unique and a new proposal that I don't think we've seen anywhere in the world, where the producers are only responsible to develop markets for their products, which is fine, but it also is a very big thing to do, and something the size of the state of California without any precedent. So I just think we might get some, questions about that, just to throw that out there. And then Commissioner Lapis?
I mean, I think there are precedents. I think the PRCC is a precedent of this for beverage containers, for example.
Can you explain that a little more, just so everybody's clear?
Yeah, the PRCC is a voluntary entity created by the beverage industry, and they facilitate, I'm going to butcher this and somebody's going to write in an angry comment, but they basically work together to facilitate the purchase of beverage containers from MRFs and then to get them to reclaimers and end users.
Okay. So it's kind of, but it's voluntary. This would be mandatory, correct?
The way I view it, and I'm not sure this is explicit, but the way I view it is forming one of these organizations could be a way for manufacturers to comply with the mandates that are going to be coming. I don't think every manufacturer has to. I mean, that's why it says can. I think it's a good change. If the aluminum can folks don't want to because their product's being recycled just fine, then, I don't think they need to. But if somebody is not meeting their targets, they would probably want to form one of these organizations to get there.
But they can form an organization voluntarily at any time. So this would be a request that it be mandatory, correct? And so it's everything that's not hazardous. I just feel like it's a little too loose to me still, exactly what we're doing here. This is another very big deal. We have to be very, very clear and explicit in what we're recommending. And somebody's got, I think it's a CO, I don't know who's CO, but your line is open and we're getting some weird noises. Please mute if you're not speaking. Or CalRecycle, just mute them. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner Segura?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Lapis. I think this is a good first step. I don't necessarily believe that it has to be mandatory, and that's why the word can. But I think there are certain materials that you'd want to form a PRO. There are some others, and I think, I think aluminum is a perfect example. It's being recycled, it's being used, and why would they need to if there's a functioning marketplace and market and system of collection, both through different avenues. So I just agree with Nick's statement.
It does say, though, the ledge priority, is it a ledge priority? And it says yes. And that, to me, indicates mandate. That's why I'm confused. And I guess we have a public comment. Is there a public comment?
Yes, from Doug Coble, the California Product Stewardship Council. It says, CPSC would like to reiterate its previous comment regarding the use of producer responsibility organization in this recommendation. Not all existing programs, nor possibly all future programs, will be the responsibility of producers. The more appropriate reference should be product stewardship organization. As a reminder, the carpet, paint, and mattress programs in California have no producer responsibility embedded in the programs. Their product stewardship programs and run by stewardship organizations.
Thank you. I agree that this is not an extended producer responsibility program, which would typically, it's mandated, and stewardship can be voluntary, but this is saying that there's a producer responsibility for market development. It's not saying it's an EPR program. But what I don't understand is, I'm not sure exactly what we're asking, because if we're saying that they could do it now. Is this just an encouragement to the producers to start a PRO and start working on market development? Commissioner Lapis?
My understanding of what Eric was trying to accomplish was, in the context of something like SB 54, is there a model of producer responsibility organizations, stewardship organizations, that could have widespread support? Because
right.
I think that's what it was going towards. I think that's why the legislation, it's listed as legislation, is required. I think that narrative probably needs to be beefed up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's not incredibly clear.
Yeah, we just have to be really, really clear on making a recommendation of this magnitude. So I guess, I'm totally fine if this is a mandated recommendation that anybody putting stuff on the market that's non-hazardous, that doesn't have a market, that we encourage legislation that would push them to develop the markets and close the loop. That should be the producer's responsibility and cost. And they can use the existing infrastructure, negotiate those agreements with the private sector. I guess I'm just not clear how, if we're encouraging them to do this voluntarily, they could do that now, and we could just encourage the producers to do this voluntarily. If it's a recommendation to do it as a mandate, then that's what it should be, just really clear. Maybe Commissioner Toyota, you want to speak to this? I'm sorry, I can't hear you now. You're having the same problem, huh? It doesn't look like you're muted, so I don't know why it's not working. It's okay. We'll come back to you if you can figure it out. Just yell out, and we'll get you in there. I don't know. My sense is this needs a little more work, but maybe it's just me. It seems like there's a lot of work put into it, but it also has changed hands a few times, and it seems to me it should be very clear who's working on this, since Commissioner Potashner is no longer with us in the commission. Of course, he's still alive. So Commissioner...
That was a little funny.
Yeah. Yeah, so Commissioner Toyota, do you have any suggestion on how to, can you speak, can we hear you? Maybe you can call in on your phone. Yeah, I think she's trying to call in on her phone for some reason. It's not working. Because I like the idea. I just want to make sure it's really clear. Any other thoughts on this? Anybody from the public? And I want to thank Commissioner Davis for kind of picking this ball up and running with it, with all the other things he has on his plate. So hopefully we can hear Commissioner Toyota in a minute.
No, I think I got it.
There you go.
Oh, there she is. There she is.
So I missed, like, I don't know how much of the conversation, but the point I think about who's covered and who's not was originally meant to be for the back end of processing. So in other words, if you have something that can go through a MRF that doesn't have a market, you are subject to this proposal. That was the intent.
And then
That's
is there,
who's covered ultimately.
have we made it clear what doesn't have a market means? Because I know that's the first question we'll get from Cal Recycle when they have to start estimating costs and things.
In the very first one where it says the PRO must pay for processing of a covered material of any type if the scrap value is less than the cost of recycling the material. So in other words, if you can't sell it, right there, if you can actually process it, if we have things that are able to be recycled, but it's not getting recycled because it just costs too much to process it versus what you can sell for at the market, that's where the distinction is. Those need to be covered, and that anything that falls into that category falls under this program.
Yeah, I think my understanding is it runs both ways, right? It could be voluntary. It could be like I said, in tandem with the what is recyclable and the on-ramp there. And then, but if there is legislation mandating, like SB 54, then yeah, this would apply in that situation. But the intent is really to use the existing infrastructure, as you said. The utility of the policy extends whether it's voluntary or mandated. So we could try to clarify that a little bit for final adoption, but I think that's the correct interpretation.
Well, to me, voluntary is voluntary, and if it's not happening now, the chances are it's not going to happen. So
well, you've got a situation that we just discussed on what is recyclable, where someone wanting to get from 60 to 75% may pursue those policies to cover costs if it's the costs that are shortfall. So we don't really know what goes forward, but it's a tool to facilitate market development.
Well, I'm all ears. To me, it feels like this is close. So I don't know if I'm not ready to vote on this today. I still think there's a little too many things that are unclear to me, and I want to be very careful because this is a very big deal, as Commissioner Lapis said. If we can agree that I'm going to propose that Commissioners Toyota and Davis go back and take the thoughts that they heard today and give this one last shot. You can accept, a lot of the changes that were in here today and any comments like on the graphic and so forth, and bring this back June 2nd. But unless I hear other ideas, is that okay? Commissioner Ward's okay with it? Is there everybody else okay with that? Commissioner Segura, you look puzzled, or maybe not?
No, I was going to just raise my hand. I know Eric is gone, and so if there's a need here, I would like to raise my hand to provide input or help with this policy.
Yeah, this is actually
a big thing. I would welcome that and ask to be substituted. So that Sarah Toyota was part of the early discussion, but I think getting Mr. Oseguera's views would be more helpful than me trying to ferret out what people are trying to include in here.
Okay, so we're going to switch out people on our two-person committee. So it'll be now, since it kind of by default went to Davis, we're going to turn it over. And so it'll be Sarah Toyota and Alex Oseguera will work on bringing this back as a final for the June 2nd meeting, where we can actually hopefully give this a thumbs up and get it in the final report. Is everybody okay with that? And then that'll be added as a report language. Great. Okay, I see thumbs up. I don't hear anybody opposing that. Okay, and Commissioner Ferrante, I assume you're okay with it?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you very much for your help because I do think this is really close. Just want to make sure it's really tight as well because I know we're going to get a lot of press and a lot of scrutiny for this, and we want to make sure it's really buttoned up and ready to go. Okay, we are at time check 11:10. We had planned on taking a break at 11:30, and as usual, this is going to be very difficult to achieve when we've still got multiple policies left, so we're going to move very quickly to hospitality textile recycling. First time before the commission. And Commissioner Davis, I'm going to go through this very quickly and then we'll take comments and you can answer any questions. But basically this was a policy that's come through the Market Development Committee 3 times and been discussed in detail. You can see there's also a letter that's been submitted. We're officially being lobbied now multiple times today anyway. To pass this from a lot of different groups. We know we've got a textiles problem in the states and across the nation. We know that textiles are a very broad category, and this actually tries to narrow that down to just hospitality, which is, I think, a good bite-sized chunk that we could possibly do. And there's a lot of groups ready and willing to work on this, which is very exciting. So this will be the textiles of sheets, towels, linens, workwear, interior fabrics such as mats and fabric and window coverings. So with that, is there anything you'd like to add, Commissioner Davis, before we take comments?
Yeah, I think that was a good summary. The policy is more narrowly focused than the whole range of textiles, but putting this in place will demonstrate the efficacy of handling really the end of life of materials that are an important but a narrower part of the stream. So yeah, it's a good start.
And I thought it was nice that Goodwill supports this because they're really burdened with a lot of the non-recyclable linens and textiles and do good work, and I hate to see them picking up all the costs. So
and just to clarify too, industrial laundries handle this material, so they're the ones making a lot of determinations about what's worn out, what isn't. So it really would, there's a pull already in place, but this would kind of use that focus of industrial laundries, which are common and also regulated in statute. So it's a good focal point.
Great.
Chair Sanborn, just want to let you know I'm signing off. So hung in there for a little more, but I have to head to my other item. So thank you
very much. Appreciate your time today. Okay, are there any thoughts from commissioners on this item? Is there anybody that would like to make a motion and vote on this, or do you want to debate it in any way, or do we have any public comments? I don't see any.
No public comments yet.
Okay. We don't have a full commission right now, as you know, but we have to keep moving. We're too close to the end for this report. So I'm just going to suggest that commissioners will all get to vote next month as well that are missing at this point. Are there any other thoughts on this item, or do I hear a motion? Commissioner Snyder?
Chair, happy to make a motion.
Okay.
To accept.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Toyota? Great. So we have a first and a second. All those that support this, thumbs up. Excellent. Anybody opposed to this or have any further comments or debate? No? Okay, great. Okay, I don't see any or hear any, so I'll assume that everybody's good. But this is exciting to get started on our foray into textiles in the state of California. So this is first reading, and then we'll go for, so this is approved for first reading. So we can actually approve this and get it into the report at the June 2nd meeting unless there's any changes. So if anybody out there wants to make any changes to this, you got to do it, let us know now so we can get it into the meeting on June 2nd. Okay, excellent. We'll just keep moving along. Carbon farming analysis and promotion. This was by Commissioner Ward. Could you go ahead and address this item?
So this was heard by the Organics Committee prior to the close of last year and just didn't make it into the January report. Bottom line is that carbon farming is one of the best ways to sequester carbon, and it is an excellent potential pull for finished compost, which of course under SB 1383 we'll be producing a lot of. It's also potentially a way that rural communities can more constructively engage in the challenges of the state in sequestering greenhouse gases and reducing their generation. So it dovetails fairly well with the Healthy Soils Initiative, but I have to confess I'm not as familiar with these programs as I would like. And so if there's additional comments, but bottom line is that, and I think it's probably worth improving the introduction to connect this proposal to the need to establish markets for finished compost and to sequester carbon to meet our goals, more clearly dovetail that with our requirements. But that being said, I think this is a fine proposal to move forward.
Okay, and this is...
Should I share my screen? Do you want to see it?
I think you should. I just want to make sure everybody understands what this is, because I don't think we've talked about it much. It was heard, I think, back in December. But we have a lot of organics out there that if we could take care of them on site, it'd be very helpful and help, because one of our tasks is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we should go to the proposal. Says it assess the potential for strategic and general application of compost and mulch materials, the techniques to sequester carbon as an important part of California's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, assess the potential for establishing standards for the application of finished compost and mulch where appropriate, especially after the aftermath of fires or mine reclamation, which could be huge markets. Assess potential concerns and controls for reducing the potential for application of finished compost to be a vector for the spread of invasive weeds. Could be used in ag, schools, other projects. And so the interaction with other agencies other than CalRecycle is not immediately. So this is really a request of CalRecycle, correct?
It mostly is, yes, and it dovetails really well with outreach efforts with regards to backyard composting and on-site composting, because it is an extension of the answer to the question of what can I do to help address greenhouse gases. And every person in the state can farm carbon on their soils where they are. And so this is how to do that. And to cut to the quick, for those of you who are watching at home and not catching all the details, the great news about carbon farming is a single one-time application of a 1/4 inch of finished compost on range lands will help sequester carbon on those lands for the next 30 years. This is just great news and something that we absolutely should find ways to encourage.
And I can speak to this briefly in that I know I've been part of discussions about energy and carbon sequestration, and many people do not even know the huge impact that this very affordable way to sequester carbon through organics and land application can be done. In fact, there was a pilot done in Alameda Stop Waste, and it was quite profound, the results of that study, and how much carbon could be sequestered and how much organics it used. So, and it was very affordable. So I'm generally supportive of this. I'm not an expert in this, but I guess, is there anybody else in the organics field? Have we heard from anyone else in the organics field on this? Like the Compost Coalition or anybody like that?
The short of it is not yet.
Okay. I guess, and isn't there a group called I think Commissioner Lapis would know, it's a farming group that works on these kinds of projects?
Yeah, CalCan is, I think, who you're thinking of.
Yep.
Or maybe the Carbon Cycle Institute. I
will
will
run this by them
send
or just...
a link.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just send this over to the folks who work on this for feedback. I should have done that earlier. I'm sorry.
Great. I'm very open to constructive revisions on this, but in the interest of time, I'd like to move that we accept this as first reading and move on to other policy discussion.
I'm comfortable with that
second
as long as we reach out to the other groups, because I don't want to miss something that we have a lot of expertise here in California on this. So can maybe Commissioner Lopez, can you work with Ward on this, because that's two-person, and then the two of you can stay connected and try to make sure everybody weighs in on this before we adopt the final, because if we have changes, we need to make them by the next meeting.
Through the chair, both myself and Commissioner Davis have asterisked. Commissioner Ward, I'm still trying to figure out how to explain this. On disaster services, the more organics we put in the soil, the better the soil can hold on to moisture. The more the plant holds on to moisture, the incremental reduction in fire danger. So I serve on emergency services. I've been trying to get this pushed in as land application for all of our high fire, our WUI territories, wildland urban interface areas. I can look at the proposal, but maybe if you just stick something in there that says working with our disaster preparedness groups on wildland urban interface, this is a great link in there. And I'm glad, I like what you did right, because in my county, there is a big farm sequestration group, and they leave out like 17 of the local governments because we're not farm country. It's the other side of the hill. It's the coast side. So I'm glad that you included all of the other applications so that our recreation lands, our trail lands, all of those are good likelihoods, as well as backyard home composters. So happy to support this if you didn't get a second.
I can add language on that.
Great. And Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, in the first paragraph, I think it's important to mention methane, and I can propose some language since we're going to look at this again. It's not just the carbon, and it's the methane avoidance as a short life climate pollutant, and actually did some analysis, taking the Marin data and applying the methane as short life climate pollutant reduction, and the numbers become pretty astronomical. But Marin's different than a lot of uses because it is rangeland, and it's really the root growth that sequesters additional carbon. So yeah, I look forward to getting the feedback from particularly Carbon Cycle Institute, from the group that I've been talking to. So,
through the chair, I'm sorry, one other thing, Commissioner Ward. San Diego, after their big fires a number of years ago, they did two studies. They did salvage logging, and they sent some of the wood up to a wood burning facility. And in another example, they took it and mulched it and put it back on forest lands. And they found that the productivity of the trees in forest lands in their uptake of carbon was drastically increased. Sadly, they never published the study. And this came through probably some Sierra Club activities about, golly, is it going on to 10 years ago? But even application in forest lands can help increase the carbon sequestration of a tree, in a simplified term. Just not a lot of data on it.
Okay, we're going to have to keep moving. We're short time, but it sounds like we've got support to take a motion on. Did we get a motion on this one yet?
I did move that we consider this as first reading.
And second?
And I seconded.
And you seconded. So we can all give a thumbs up to this. But to me, it's conditional on the fact we get feedback from others and we hear what that is, and the language is final, June 2nd. Great, thank you. Thanks for your work on that. I know you've been very patient waiting for it to be heard. And the next item is also by Commissioner Ward, redefine reusable food service packaging. It's been before the commission just at the last meeting. And we had talked about merging different items, and he says here at the top that it was impractical to incorporate this policy proposal into the recommendations from the labeling committee regarding food service packaging because it proposes to change current regulations. So with that, Commissioner Ward, you can.
Right. And I appreciate Commissioner Sky taking a look at this and seeing how it could be incorporated. But as he was pointing out, the labeling recommendations are largely how to implement the existing regulations, whereas this was proposing that we either reinterpret or redefine the regulations that have been adopted with respect to labeling something as reusable. This primarily relates to the state agency Buy Recycled campaign, and I'm sorry, the state agency procurement policy about food service packaging. But the bottom line is that my concern about the existing regs is that you could read those regs and look at a yogurt container with a fitted top and consider that container reusable. And my very, very large concern is we've already had experience in plastics being claimed as being recyclable or compostable, regardless of how that impacted the markets that we're all working so hard to try to develop and protect. And I would hate to see the same thing happen to reuse. I do not want to see functionally single-use plastic packaging labeled as reusable because somebody somewhere could potentially find a use for it. That's not what reusable should mean. And it certainly shouldn't be an avenue by which anybody who can't find a way to recycle or compost their package should be able to label their product. So the proposal is the CalRecycle draft regulations to include the definition of reusable food service packaging, a requirement for the practical reuse of such packaging to be demonstrable. Demonstrating the potential for reuse in itself is inadequate to allow such labeling to move forward. Reusable items or packages should be able to demonstrate that after delivery of the food service provided that there is at least an 80% performance standard that such item be washed or sanitized and refilled in preparation for the next service delivery. And until such process can be developed, applications for food service packaging items to be placed on the reusable list should address how this package addresses these four factors. How do they decrease transport distances between steps in the supply chain, such as package supplier, food manufacturer, retailer, and washing facility and refilling site? Ensure an increased number of reuse cycles so that the packaging is reused as many times as possible. Reducing the packaging production impacts by choosing material with lower production emissions and or increasing the percentage of recycled content, and ensure that the packaging is recyclable, that is recycled at the end of life instead of being incinerated or landfilled.
Okay, we've got
So
a couple of comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got Commissioners Toyota and then Lapis.
I really support this. My only question is it, should we tell CalRecycle to draft the policy or should we actually turn this into, this is, I should say, you've done most of the work. It sounds like, you could do that, I don't want to say easily, but with a lot, help and some more time to actually write up maybe the changes that should be there that you're asking for specifically in an actual policy.
I'd be interested to hear what Mr. Lapis has to say about that, because there's the dovetail between the existing legislation and the way the regulations were developed and the regulations that are in place. So I want to make sure that we're going through the proper steps.
Okay.
My biggest concern in when it comes to defining reusable, and especially in the context of 1335, is that we're kind of missing the most basic part of the definition, that like reusable food serviceware, something that gets reused on site, right? Like it's a plate that they go and then they wash and then they give to somebody else.
Sure.
And I think that we tend to, or the regulations as proposed or as were adopted are really focused on specific standards and has to be able to be reused X number of times and be certified and all that. And I just think that totally misses the point of, no, I'm using reusable cutlery because I'm reusing it on site. And I feel like your part one here sort of gets to that with the 80%. I wish it could be maybe a little bit more explicit, unless that's not necessarily what you meant. But I just think that's
the single most important part. So how I saw these regulations is I was reading this. This is for reusable food service packaging. And so I view that as essentially the people who are trying to market foods into state agencies. I'm thinking of vending machines, things like that, and other food serviceware. There's no need to label a fork or a plate as reusable. That has no function. They don't need that label now. They don't need it tomorrow. The reuse label is particularly for food service packaging, and my biggest concern at this point is that that label be misapplied. And so I don't think this applies to forks and knives. I don't think that are metal and
So I
washed
think
on site.
that's my concern.
Okay.
Because they absolutely do need to be labeled, because a cafeteria at a CSU or whatever is not legally allowed to use any food serviceware that's not recyclable, compostable, or reusable. And a fork is not recyclable or compostable. So if the definition of reusable doesn't cover the obviously reusable things, then we're going to be disincentivizing.
No, and I want to support that. It's just, I don't think it needs to be labeled. We don't need to emboss a fork with a reusable label that's metal.
We don't need them to label it, but we do need the definition of reusable to account for that as kind of the normal scenario, and then maybe have some niche, some product that, you know, is a packaging that can be reusable, but that's a really like fluke scenario that is pretty rare. For the most part, reusable means it's reused. That's my take on it.
What about something that's designed for reuse, intentionally designed for use? A fork, a metal fork, a porcelain plate. They're designed to be reused, and so by definition they're reusable. And then the concern about reusing other stuff incidentally to its initial design is really what the policy addressed. But I think, you know, just calling out items that are intended to be reused as opposed to incidental application.
It looks like we're losing Commissioner Sky now, so they're falling like flies. And Commissioner Ferrante is having a hard time staying connected as well, just so you know. So we might have to have a full vote at the next meeting.
Should Ted and I form a committee and talk about this?
I would be delighted to work with Commissioner Lapis on this, because I do want to have this work. We all agree that forks and plates should be accommodated and supported, and concerns about inappropriate use of the reuse label is the concern we're trying to address.
Okay, so then we are not going to adopt this today. You two are going to look at this, so it'll be a Commissioner Ward and Lapis, and you're going to come back with a proposal for us on June 2nd.
Yep.
Sound good? Okay. So, and then we have to move quickly on to the next one. So thank you both for doing that. We'll look forward to seeing the next version. We have Commissioner Ward, you also had export and expand reuse and repair businesses proposal. And this is initial concept. This is the first time, well, actually we first heard it May 5th.
No, we tried to hear it last time. It didn't quite get voiced.
Okay.
So the short of this is I really want to find some tangible way that we can support reuse and repair businesses in a tangible way in the short term statewide. So that is the challenge, because of course, as you all know, we don't really have any constructive level of engagement on a professional basis. Most municipal solid waste managers would have to look in the phone book to figure out all their reuse centers and repair shops, and it would be a research project. And so to me, what as I was trying to chew on what we could possibly do, a lot of what I came up with was we have a similar relationship right now with reuse and repair shops as we do with food banks and food rescue organizations. And immediately prior to the adoption of 1383. They're important. They provide community benefits in a variety of ways, and they're a part of our waste reduction infrastructure that we need to find a way to constructively engage with. And so to me, the right approach is how we're starting to approach it with 1383. Think of them as tier 1 and tier 2 generators. Think of them as tier 1 and tier 2 reuse and repair facilities, facilities that keep materials in circulation. So how can we engage them in a way that actually supports? And so my thought was, well, if we engage them in the RDRS system under in a similar framework to SB 1383, and then once they logged into that system, they became eligible for reductions or of their cost for disposal, then that could be a constructive engagement. And in fact, it would be a largest constructive engagement with the folks who are handling the most materials. So, and we wanted to have a broad brush about who could be supported for this. So categories of reuse, repair, salvage, and resale entities could include libraries, diaper and uniform, laundry services, repair, restoration, and upholstery shops, businesses that have core focus on reuse or refilling, community gardens, organic processing facilities, equipment rental and leasing, businesses approved to accept public donations for product or material recovery, used building material salvage and sales, thrift stores, that could potentially be expanded to things like pawn shops, consignment, and antique stores. But this would have to be phased in. And so it seems that we could do that by beginning with the RDRS reporting in 2023, start establishing a process for reducing or waiving those disposal fees for those eligible businesses in 2024, and phase it in, essentially. But the advantages of taking this approach is it would be statewide, it would cover rural and urban areas, and it would enable constructive engagement on the reuse and repair businesses that are currently handling the most materials and have the greatest disposal problems that we might actually be.
Commissioner Ward, have you talked to any reuse businesses about being included in the DRS system?
I have not. They don't know what it is. And the advantage of this approach is that if they don't already have a challenge with their disposal expenses, they don't necessarily have an incentive to engage in this process. If they do have that challenge, then they do. So it's a way of engaging literally the low-hanging fruit, the folks who are handling the most materials, because they have the greatest incentive to engage.
My concern about this is, I see what you're trying to do, but I guess what I'm worried about is these businesses are hanging on by their fingernails right now, and to add anything to their plate that is not funded, I'm not sure it's fair or going to be helpful to them, and I would not want to pass this unless we're sure they think it would be helpful, you know?
I can only agree. As I was trying to look at ways that we might be able to help, the suggestions that I had heard from reuse, repair, and salvage industries tended to be really focused on narrowly on a particular aspect of that avenue, or it was focused on particular sizes of particular entities. So it was really hard to get a broad-based support. So that's how this.
And we have 2 more policies, and we have 20 minutes, and we haven't even talked about the budget. So I'm going to move this very quickly. Commissioner Schneider? Commissioner Schneider?
I like where this is going. It's a good start on that. I would love to see us move forward on this. Commissioner Ward, when we increased disposal and AB 939 fees, the big thrift stores do see an increase in illegal dumping, items they can't deal with. So an assistance on disposal cost is what we did for the big 3 thrift stores in San Jose. However, I am now learning that local governments have a much more difficult time of exempting businesses or residents from certain things like Lifeline for water sewage fees and things like that. So with that new lens, I don't know how we can do it legally in terms of say, well, we won't charge you the AB 939 fee, but I like the concept of it, and it will help them. It'll especially help the big ones that are multi-material donations, probably also all of the used building material stores that are bulky. So it's a good place, good start.
And I would be fine to broaden the discussion. I just don't know who to talk to about this that I haven't come up with.
Yeah, Commissioner.
And actually, in all honesty, that's been part of my challenge. At CRRA group, many of you are familiar with, one of the great things about it is this big umbrella for all of these different aspects of the recovery industry. And the same is needed for reuse and repair. And as far as I know, I don't know of a similar organization. So this would be sort of the starting point of trying to incentivize that as well.
Well, I would add to that in the beginning of the process, I reached out to the national reuse organizations, and most of them have morphed into something else. And with RARC, the Reuse Repair Council for CRA, we had a really tough time of actually getting reuse repair entities into the recycling world. So here it is 20 years later, and it's still difficult. So Chair Sanborn, it is hard to get these people to speak, It's hard to get these groups to come up and tell us what they need, other than land banking and making sure that we recognize that they're essential businesses.
Yeah, we have to ask them now. I would be very nervous about passing policies like this without even talking to some of these folks. Commissioner Davis?
Okay, so do we want to do a survey? How do we engage?
Commissioner Davis has an idea.
So CRA does have a prevention, reuse, and repair council. We had 35 people on the last call. There's a lot of people in the industry. That's probably as good a starting point to get orientation. And but I did want to point out, I'm not sure about waiving disposal costs. You know, if you have a 3-yard bin, it's not the disposal cost. It's the picking up the bin that is the main cost. So. And putting, I don't even know how you put this in a DRS system, because it's you know, they're getting collected on a truck along with, 50 other commercial bins. I'm not sure that part works, but what you're trying to do is reduce their costs. It's really not the disposal charge, unless they're self-hauling. It's that total collection charge. So it's just a thought, but I can help point you to Shauna McCracken chairs the Reuse Council now, so you can reach out to her.
Okay, so I'm going to make a suggestion again, because we're so short on time, is to have Commissioner Ward. Is there anybody else who would like to work with Commissioner Ward on this item? Because it would be helpful to have at least 2 commissioners thinking through these things. And this is, we've said, highest priority.
Yeah, I'll help and get it to the CRA council where we can have a discussion.
So we'll add you to this. Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Appreciate it. And then if there's anything you could do to get some feedback, I'm very nervous about passing something that's going to require anything of reuse businesses right now without funding, without talking to them. And I know that the state budget, which I really want to get to, has new supports for market development, and I want to get to the fact that I don't see a lot of reuse in there. So any thoughts on how to handle this? My initial thought is, for me, I'm just not comfortable yet. If there's a little more work that could be done on this, and then we can bring it back on the 2nd for first and second reading, just to hear from some industries, because I support the concept, of course, but.
I'd be happy to work with Commissioner Davis and see if we can bring something back.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I know we've been trying to get reuse out there for so long. Okay, so we'll hold update. And then there's 2 more, so we'll try quickly to touch on them both. Personal care, fiber-derived products, recycled content. I'd love to change the name, Commissioner Marjana. I think this is about, if we could change it to something more, exciting, like, I don't know, something like procurement of recycled content, personal care products, something like procurement, because this really is a procurement item, correct?
No, it's actually a requirement on recycled content. So, in the best interest of time, I really would just quickly like to thank folks in the NRDC to help put this policy together. Jennifer Skeen, Shelley Vineyard, and Zach Smith. They're really helpful at putting this together. So ultimately, this calls for a 90% recycled content on personal care products by 2030, by January 1st of 2030. We had several meetings to plan and coordinate this. We also met with the Institute and consulted with the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries, ISRI, who had some hesitations on a quick ramp up, but as I mentioned, it gives the industry quite a bit of time, at least 9 years, I guess, at this point, to be able to provide this type of recycled content. So if there are any, hopefully the commissioners that are online still had a chance to look at it. If there's any recommendations, we could include them now. This was also heard at the Market Development Committee, and there were some additions that were suggested and were put in as well. So I'm open to suggestions. So if not, we could move forward.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm clear, so the proposal is that we require 100% post-consumer recycled content. When we say personal care products, it's mostly toilet paper, correct?
It's actually 90%, and it's in personal care. It's not just toilet paper; it's tissue and napkins. But just a quick point of perspective is that in the U.S. we're flushing 15 billion pounds of personal care fiber products down the toilet. So why are we doing this when we could be making them out of high percentage, 90% recycled content? And,
so this really aligns with the Commission's goals of developing markets.
That's correct. And fiber products and fiber in general makes one of the top 3 items in our waste characterization, statewide waste characterization study. So this is also part of helping that effort. There's also Assembly Bill 416 that was also brought up, that was brought in, co-sponsored by NRDC, who addresses this issue for state contractors and state purchasing.
So there's a bill in play that's already going to require the state to do this, but now we're making a policy, this is a policy recommendation to require the state not just to do it themselves, but that there's no products sold in California that meet these standards.
Correct.
Okay. That's going to make a lot of people, that's a big ask. Okay. And then I just wanted to point out, I think it's a typo under California MRFs. It's got a little I after it in that proposal paragraph, no big deal.
What page is that?
At the very end.
Okay.
And then there should probably be a space between proposals and enforcement, no big deal there either. But any thoughts on this? Commissioner Davis, did you want to speak to this one or you were on the last one?
No, that was the last one.
Okay. Because this, if we recommend that products not be sold in the state that do not have less than 100% post-consumer, it certainly would drive markets.
And that was the purpose of bringing this to the market development. Also worth pointing out is that there's also a proposal for labeling these products. So I do have to admit that we did not consult with the labeling committee, but it's just somewhat of the same labeling efforts to make sure that consumers in California know that these products are forest safe, I guess, in a way.
Is there anybody, Commissioner Lapis, did you have a question?
I was going to say, I think this is a great idea. And, we have recycled content mandates for other fiber products like newsprint. There's paper bags under SB 270 have a recycled content mandate. This is low-hanging fruit. So I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Well, I'll just give you my take on how this is going to go over. With my political hat on, telling people that they cannot buy at any price paper that is less than 100% post-consumer, I think is going to be met with a lot of kickback. Just my take on it, and I think it's going to, I'm not sure if it's a good idea to ruffle feathers that much. I'm nervous about it, I have to say. Not that I think I certainly am fine personally with it, but I'm just saying, I just don't think everybody out there would be comfortable with us dictating that they cannot buy a different type of tissue.
I think that the slow ramp up to the full 90% recycled content will help adjust the industry to not only provide a quality product, but also provide the recycled content. So I mean, the slow ramp up by the end of the decade might, include products already with the same quality people are used to. They might not even know that this is a change. So we're just addressing the issue of the rapid deterioration of the forests, especially in the Canadian boreal areas. So.
Yeah. And I've been fighting this for 20 years, and I totally want to support that. And I actually, in my private life, support that bill because of the way it's written. It's the state procurement and use of state money and using the market, but that's a carrot. And this is a mandate that you can't sell. That's a very different proposal.
I propose that if we move this forward, it'd be up to the legislature to pick it up. I think there's a lot of really compelling arguments for it. So I think it's like you said earlier, it's a call for this commission. So we're proposing this, and hopefully it'll be picked up. And there's plenty of information available.
Okay, and I'm also nervous we do not have quite a few commissioners on this call, and I think this is the first time they really would have a chance to speak to this. Is there anybody that has any proposed changes or edits or thoughts about who to reach out to on this before next month? Because otherwise, if this comes back, I would not want to approve this right now until there's more commissioners that have read this. This is a very big deal as well. So I would be ready to vote on this next month. Is there anybody that we could reach out to on this? Have you talked to Forest and Paper or any of the groups that would be providing this recycled content, or any of the industries that would be providing the products?
Yes, we spoke to ISRI representatives, met with them. In fact, Brett Biggers, who presented to this commission last year, who represents the industry. Again, they have a little bit of apprehension of how quickly the industry could retool, but they've had a chance to look at this. They didn't provide additional comments.
Okay. We have to move on, but I guess my thought is we don't have a full commission at this point. We've lost quite a few people. Kapikoff dropped off, and Sky and others, and this is really important. So I would suggest that we just hold this until the next meeting. And if nobody has any outside of the header, if nobody's got any other proposed changes, that we just take it out for first reading June 2nd, and make sure, again, we've got plenty of time and input for people. If everybody's okay with that. If you want to move on and vote, I'm just not, I don't know, I'm a little nervous about this one for some reason. I just feel like it's so big. It's different to have an incentive than a mandate. So I would ask that we just put this over, because at least I would not be ready to vote on it right now. Okay, so we're just going to hold this to June 2nd, and then hopefully we can get a vote then and make sure everybody's ready. And I'm sorry, there's so many commissioners missing. It's kind of a problem when we have items that are this big in front of us. And then organics, the small scale farm and ranch composting, this one dates before the committee. It has not been brought to the commission before, and I think Commissioner Ward, we talked about that this would be the last one, but it keeps getting bumped, but we've only got 7 minutes to talk about the budget.
Right, and I think the Organics Committee needs to revisit that. The short of it is that there are folks supporting it, but the big question is to what extent that food from any source would be acceptable. That seemed to be the main concern. Of course, while we want to encourage small farms and ranches to compost materials and to be part of the SB 1383 food waste recovery solutions, we want to make sure that we're not creating problems or huge loopholes in the law as we do that. So it'll continue to be chewed on by the Organics Committee before being brought back.
Okay, so this will go back to the Organics Committee. Thank you very much. Okay, well with that, sorry again, we will never seemingly get a break, no matter how much we try to schedule them. The next agenda item is number 6, an update and review of legislation. And everything seems to be moving, and we've kept it updated on the spreadsheet. We'll find out by the end of this week for some things on appropriations. But I did put into the folder for the Google folder for this meeting that the governor's May budget revision has a very important section on it starts on page 143, and it's called the circular economy section. And it says that they recognize that circular economy recognizes waste as a resource, and by shifting the state's focus to reuse, which is exciting to hear that in there, and recycle materials, that would otherwise be thrown away. A more resilient and renewable economy can be built in California. So they really get to a lot of what we've talked about, and we're excited that Director Wagner can join us at the next meeting to discuss this as well. We can ask her questions. In the May revision, it says that they're proposing $130 million one-time general fund support to develop infrastructure required to process recyclables and manufacture products from recyclable material. This is the first time I've ever seen the state do this. Historically, California has shipped recyclable material to other nations, which contributes to the global carbon footprint. These investments will help reduce global carbon emissions and generate the feedstock to attract remanufacturing businesses to California. So that's very exciting. They've got money in here, $5 million for edible food recovery in disadvantaged areas, $5 million for composting opportunities, again, in disadvantaged communities, $55 million for organic waste infrastructure, very large amount there, and then $15 million for recycling technology feasibility grants, and $50 million to provide low interest rate loans to attract recycling businesses to California. But we already have the RMDZ program. I'm not sure. It seems duplicative. Maybe I'm not understanding, or they're just going to give it to the RMDZ program, but they're calling it the Climate Catalyst Fund. It's designed to align with existing tax incentives and already offered by the state. They also say they're going to additionally, Department of CalRecycle will create an Office of Innovation and Market Development and Remanufacturing within using its existing resources to work cooperatively with the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development to identify and support businesses that foster development and deployment of new technologies and create high-road jobs in recycling and remanufacturing. To me, and somebody tell me if you think I'm wrong, but that feels an awful lot like our recommendations 8 and 9 from the last report. The GoBiz, Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, having an enhanced role, and recycling market development focus of CalRecycle, and possibly even the 6, which was recycling market development zone enhancements, if any of this money comes to the RMDZ, but it kind of doesn't sound like it is. It sounds like its own Climate Catalyst Fund. So I just wanted to make sure everybody saw that, and this has to be approved by June 15th. If anyone wants to individually comment, you certainly can. They had a hearing actually while we were in the commission meeting today. My staff was making comments, but that's something we could also weigh in on. And time is of the essence because they're having hearings in the budget subcommittees right now. So any thoughts on this? And we literally have 3 minutes, Commissioner Medrano.
Quickly, Chair, this is exciting news. I learned about this on last week as soon as it was proposed. And whether it's through the RMDZ program or just market development proposal or available funding, it's a really good infusion of funding to have that much amount there. So I'm really supportive of that effort and the effort of the new proposed office.
Thank you. Commissioner Lapis? We have 2 minutes.
This is the 3rd year in a row, I think, maybe the 4th year in a row, where the administration has proposed a Climate Catalyst Fund that would give low interest loans. And it's always for 3 categories, if I recall correctly. It's circular economy, sustainable agriculture, and forestry. I think after this report, and maybe after July, the Market Development Committee should have a conversation about whether or not we think it would be most efficient to create a brand new low interest loan program in addition to the RMDZ one and the GGRF one that we already have, or if it would make more sense to recommend that future proposals augment those programs.
Yeah, we have 30 seconds, so I'm going to just say I totally agree, and wanted to make sure you all saw that and everybody out there heard about that. I know we're drafting at our organization a sign-on letter to support the general concepts of all this. We're very excited about it, but certainly there could be some refinement. So thank you to everybody. A lot of good work today, and I'm sorry to push you all the way through. The next meeting, we're going to have Director Wagner, and we're just going to take up the report. So Ted and I have a whole lot of work. If any of you have, language you need to get us from your committees or an updated policy based on the discussion today, please do it as soon as you can so everybody has ample time to look at everything. We must really make sure we do our homework before the next meeting and adopt the final report in the first reading. With that, we're done. Thank you very much. We'll see you on June 2nd. Great work. Bye, everyone.